Jack?
We are, but I don't know where he is.
Okay, we are ready to go.
Okay. This is the November 15th meeting of the Marin Municipal Water District Board of Directors. And the first thing I need is a roll call.
Vice President Schmidt,
Here.
Director Bragman. Oh, you're on mute, sir. But I see you. Director Gibson. Director Kohler
I'm here.
and President Russell.
Here. Okay. So I need a motion to adopt the agenda.
So move. Second.
Roll call, please.
Vice President Schmidt,
Aye.
Director Bragman,
Aye.
Director Kohler,
Aye.
and President Russell.
Aye. Okay, the next item is the Director and General Manager's announcements. I'm going to take a few minutes here to make a global announcement. I just
I'm
want to
sorry,
thank.
President Russell, I think we had general public comment. I don't know if we have any
Oh,
interest
okay,
in
that's
that.
fine. That's fine.
Did
Are
we
there
have
any?
There are no public comments.
I anticipated that. Okay, so what I was about to say is this. I just want to thank Director Bragman, Director Gibson, and Director Kohler for the thousands of hours they've put into the Water District. And I want to thank them on behalf of the Water District, behalf of the board, and behalf of the citizens of Marin, who are the users of our water district. And with that, I would like to have, Ben, do you have any comments?
Not this evening, President Russell.
Okay, great. Then let's start off. Cynthia wants to make a statement, and let's start with that, Cynthia.
Okay, great. Thanks, Larry. My term technically doesn't end until December, and we have a few more committee meetings this week, but this is my last regular board meeting, and I thought the occasion should be noted. So not surprisingly, I have a few thoughts to share with board and staff. You'll be addressing a number of issues going forward in the new year without me, but I want to focus for a few moments on water supply resilience. The historic nature of the recent drought has crystallized that climate change has ushered in an entirely new paradigm, requiring an open-mindedness to new solutions and strategies. A one water approach in particular that integrates management of water resources and treats all water as a resource is gaining traction in the water sector and could be a critical path here in Marin if it's planned for appropriately. The key will be innovative approaches to expanding supply while also anticipating a future beyond maintaining the water use status quo. So just a few points about the path ahead. Everyone agrees about the need to be resilient, but there are differing views of what that means. In the water supply assessment discussion, resilience is too often equated with simply having more water on hand. This runs counter to how resilience is usually defined, which is the ability of a system or a community exposed to hazards to resist, absorb, accommodate to, and recover from such hazards in a timely and efficient manner. In other words, resilience from a water provider perspective is not just about gross amount of water available. It's about the combination of factors in addition to water quantity that ensure a system can deliver under high stress. So this includes at the very least a strong and viable workforce, a healthy, ecologically functioning watershed, fiscal health, reliable water infrastructure, just to name a few. So true meaningful resilience for Marin water in the sense of having a water provider capable of weathering drought and the rapidly changing climate will flow from at least 5 factors. First, continuing the current commitment to investing in the system, the deeply unsexy but impactful work of upgrading pipes, tanks, and other infrastructure. This is not work that has been deferred, but has been steadily ongoing since Larry Russell and I began with the board in 2005. And while there's always more that can be done, the reality is that Marin water is very good at this and gets virtually no credit for it. My guess is that if we polled today, we'd find that only a tiny sliver of ratepayers is aware that their water district invests tens of millions each year to ensure that our treatment plants remain online, or that we've replaced most of our old tanks over the last 2 decades, and on and on. We can spend all the money we want on new supply, but if we can't get it to ratepayers where and when they need it, it won't be worth very much. Second, resilience depends on building regional partnerships, not running away from them. Partnerships always come with some element of risk and lack of control, but also huge potential benefits. There's no question that our supply situation has benefited tremendously from our strong partnership over the decades with Sonoma County. The 9 Bay Area counties completed a regional resilience plan almost a decade ago. Its premise is that more connectivity is inherently good, that the more these agencies are physically connected to one another, the more benefits they can provide to their own ratepayers. Yet Marin is still not fully connected to this network. I'm not necessarily advocating for the proposed bridge, Richmond Bridge intertie. That may yet prove to be infeasible for any number of reasons, but neither should it be reflexively dismissed because it involves partnerships that we can't control. The opportunities to be interconnected to California's vast water market is a potential game changer for Marin. The rest of the world understands that partnerships are a huge part of the water resilience equation, and so should we. That brings me to the third factor in growing water resilience, building system redundancies. As I've said for many years at these meetings, in my opinion editorials and elsewhere, the district's best path forward on water supply is a portfolio approach, silver buckshot, if you will, not reliance on a silver bullet. What I mean by this is having multiple paths to water supply security. So the district should not be trying to choose between augmenting supply and permanently reducing demand, but doing more to develop a strategy to do both. So for example, connecting to the East Bay for water transfers or regional desal, and also investing in Sonoma County groundwater banking, and also looking ahead to advanced direct potable reuse. These are all viable strategies with very different timeframes. One of the most important paths to system redundancy is, again, through a one water approach that integrates drinking water, wastewater, and stormwater, treating all water touching the community as the valuable and precious resource and asset that it is, instead of something to be discharged as waste. That day is coming soon, and the district can be doing more to plan for it now. Fourth, resilience in the face of the rapidly changing climate is going to mean greater openness to innovation, technology, and a new relationship between consumers and their water supply, as a number of us on the board have been advocating for some time. Around the nation, we're seeing that the more people know about how much water they're using and when and for what purposes, the more engaged and efficient they're becoming, with very substantial decreases in water demand. Whether it's advanced meter infrastructure known as AMI, or flume meters, leak detection devices, or weather-based irrigation controllers, and so much more, there is an explosion of water tech right now that is poised to revolutionize on-site reuse and efficiency. The more the district can invest in these and similar measures, the more resilient the community will be, because there is simply nothing more drought-proof than reducing system demands. However, at present, these strategies are where the district invests the least, somewhere between $300,000 and $500,000 annually for consumer rebates, compared with tens of millions for our conventional supply and water purchases. The supply assessment underway is affirming that demand reduction strategies are the most affordable for ratepayers. They are also the fastest to deploy and the most equitable for everyone. It only makes sense to get more realistic and serious about pursuing them. Without question, ensuring access to a larger and more varied water supply portfolio, including supply augmentation, is the right path. But a strategy restricted largely to the water use status quo cannot be reconciled with a changing climate or financial or equity consideration. And fifth, system resilience turns on people. We are incredibly fortunate with our fine workforce at Marin Water. I was never more aware of this than a few years ago when the COVID pandemic first struck, and there was a fair amount of panic in the air, and the district staff rose incredibly to the occasion, ensuring that there was not a moment of uninterrupted services, notwithstanding extraordinary and stressful health and safety challenges. Today, with substantial numbers of people leaving the district for retirement or off to new opportunities, morale is at a low point, we're hearing, with too few people trying to cover too many positions and discussions about providing fewer services to ratepayers. The district's ability to address and recover from drought and other hazards in a timely and efficient manner, the basic definition of resilience, depends on its ability to cultivate and retain an exceptional workforce. I urge the board to turn its attention in this direction. The most successful water utilities of the future, here in Marin as well as elsewhere, will be those that earn the public's trust and confidence every day. This will require, among other things, that the district redouble its efforts to tell its own story and not let it be framed by others in an information vacuum. Connecting with the public is especially important in this moment for other reasons as well. In the past few years, the tone of these meetings and local media has turned toxic and occasionally abusive, as the national habit of attacking local leaders has come home to roost here. This is a deeply saddening and profoundly unfortunate development in my view. There's plenty of room for reasonable people to disagree about these complex water issues and to have vigorous, robust debates about the investment trade-offs involved. But there is no reason that these debates should not be civil and respectful, appreciating that all players, including district leaders and staff, are acting in good faith, are working incredibly hard, and are motivated by sincere beliefs about where the agencies and the public's best interests lie. But of course, that is not what's happening here. It's been disheartening to see Marin fall victim to the national trend of demeaning, smearing, and spreading disinformation about local leaders, what they've said, what they believe, and what they've done. This phenomenon is, of course, not limited to the water districts, but impacts many, if not most, local entities from the Board of Supervisors on down. What's needed is for the larger community to come together, break through silos, get beyond the toxic blame game dominating the local narrative, and to move ahead constructively and with purpose. And I believe it can be done. In my experience on the board, most public engagement has been enormously beneficial, with the best of these folks among our toughest critics, asking difficult probing questions and raising vital issues. But they've done so in ways that have enhanced the district's mission, with civility, with humility for what they may not know, with respect for differing views, and with a clear sense of working for the public interest. In that vein, I want to take a moment to acknowledge and thank some of the most consistent Marin water watchers and critics over my tenure. They include Annie Laser, Ann Thomas, Barbara Salzman, Baron Hamill, Donna Gallagher-Stroh, Debbie Raffel, Joe Keene, Jean Berensmeyer, Larry Minikes, Nancy Praetzel, Nona Dennis, Paul Mann, Phil Sauter, Priscilla Bull, Roger Peters, Roger Roberts, Susan Ives, Tom Boss, and many others, too numerous to name tonight, who take time out of their lives to show up and to set us on what they feel is a better path. While we haven't always agreed with these critics, I have always appreciated and respected their views and the thoughtfulness with which they express them. We have often been persuaded by their perspectives and their insights and their ideas. More importantly, I have always learned from them and valued their engagement, probably far more than they know. I hope that they will continue to engage and that others will join them and participate because the district faces key decisions ahead and the community needs more voices of reason and good faith. In closing, notwithstanding the challenges, I have great confidence and optimism about the opportunities ahead and in the ability of Marin Water to continue to serve the public reliably and well, providing water to everyone in the community, water that is among the most safe, the healthiest, and the tastiest in the nation. I wish all of you the very best and success going forward, and in particular, my fellow board members for whom I have great regard. I know that each of you, Larry, Jack, Monty, and the other Larry, bring your best selves to this challenging work every day. You have contributed incredibly to this district, and I've appreciated your collaboration over the years. Finally, I want to express my gratitude to my wonderful family who have been so unfailingly supportive, and to my friends, neighbors, and constituents in Southern Marin who I've had the privilege to represent for these 18 years. Thank you so much for your enduring support and faith in me, and for the opportunity to serve. It has been an honor.
Thank you, Cynthia. Well said. And thank you again for your service for the 18 years. Larry, would you have anything to say, or would you like to say anything?
I would just really like to thank Ben and the rest of the team for everything they've done to get the district through COVID, through drought. The frontline workers who literally were in the trenches to keep the water supply going during COVID and drought. And to the residents of Marin who really demonstrated a keen interest in conservation during the height of the drought, which really got us through the drought. In spite of the results of the election, Like Cynthia, for me, it's been tremendously satisfying working with my colleagues on the board and of course with staff. The past 2 terms have seen the district adopt a historic ban on toxic herbicides, live streaming our meetings, increasing low-income discount opportunities, creating inspiring habitat restoration for endangered coho and threatened steelhead, bringing the flume to Marin's water vocabulary, and finally, blazing the roadmap to resilience and water security through local storage and reinvigorated conservation. And when you add it all up, we've come a long, long way in the 8 years that I've been on the board. So many challenges lie ahead, and it's a personal disappointment for me to have to leave midstream. But I do so knowing that our agency is actually poised for success. With the influx of new directors, an even greater burden is going to fall on the shoulders of staff and the incumbent directors who remain behind. But I also have the utmost confidence in all of you and remain tremendously grateful for the opportunity I've had addressing the challenges we face together on behalf of the public we all serve. So I really just want to express my thanks and gratitude to all of you and to the public that allowed me to serve.
Thank you for all of your input, Larry, and your thoughtful thinking and hard work. It was sincerely appreciated, and it will leave a mark on the district forever. And I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Jack, any comments?
Sure. I actually wasn't planning to say anything necessarily tonight, but given the opportunity, I will take advantage of it. I've been on the board for 27 years. I have worked with innumerable other board colleagues over the years, a number of general managers, and of course, a staff that has turned over enormously in those years. In the 27 years that I've been on the board, I periodically will have people, and sometimes they're the same people, come up to me and say, Jack, why do you do it? I don't get it. And what's the upside? And they really don't get it. And I tell them, and I'll tell you, the upside is, first of all, you're working in a team. And the satisfaction of that, and with a lot of good people all doing important things, is enormously satisfying. That's the upside, and it's irreplaceable. It can't be duplicated somewhere else. As I think most of you know, I am enormously interested, and I have been for some time, in the history of the district, and I have continued to do work on that, and I continue to do more. I don't intend to stop that. I plan to continue that and hopefully produce some important product as a result of it. So that's my commitment to you. I will follow through on that. And thank you to all of you to make it a very gratifying experience and allowing me to be on your team.
Mhm.
Thank you, Jack. And in particular, thank you for all of the work that you've done and the good thinking that you've done and the record that you've established is a permanent treasure chest for the district. As you know, I am a person who really believes in institutional memory and have seen the consequences of the release of institutional memory. The USGS being probably the most pertinent example of a disaster resulting from that. So you will be missed, I can tell you that, both personally for me and for the district. So we treasure your input and hope you stay close to us, and wish it wasn't happening in this format.
I have good news for you. I'm like a toothache. I don't go away either.
Well, especially if you're an Irish toothache, then we can at least have somebody to drink
Right,
and
right.
celebrate with. Okay, thank
Larry,
you all.
Before we
sure,
get
Mike.
going,
Sure,
yeah, I'd love to take it. I would not want to pass up this moment to to, as you know, obviously a relatively newcomer to this board, I want to thank Larry and Jack and Cynthia for all the work that has become clear to me over the past 2 years as I have learned about our district, our history, the complexities of the challenges that we have faced over the years, the amount of effort that has gone into making sure that our district is as strong as it is, and to address the new challenges that we do face. And it is really, it just is the amount of time and effort that it takes to over the years to engage in these committees and to review information and thoughtfully respond to proposals by staff and to support staff and the general manager and the leadership. It is a lot of work, and it is obviously, I've come to learn that in a small fraction of it in my brief tenure, and I can see the work ahead of us. But the things that you folks have done have left a very much a lasting impression on the district, and a good impression, and a place where we are looking at a water supply resiliency study that is really truly the launching point of where the next phase of our district is and will be in the future as we adapt to a changing climate and increasing challenges and demands upon our district, but we will rise up to that challenge. But the things that all of you have done have put us on a good foundation. And I know that we have big challenges ahead. We will have a lot, as somebody, again, still, honestly, I'll humbly admit, there's many things that Jack, Larry, Cynthia, that you folks know about the district that I wish I could just absorb into my head right now. You can just hand it over to me, because there's so much knowledge that you all have, and our incoming board members will have a lot to learn. But I have a feeling that we will be calling you folks and hoping to see you folks continuing to be supportive of our district. You still live in the district. This is still your district. It's still your water. And I think that we really will benefit from continuing to have your support into the future. And so thank you for the lasting impression that you have made, and the contributions that you've given, and the service that you've given to our community.
Thank you, Monty. Well said. We're going to have an in-person celebration of the tenure of our 3 directors that are leaving the board. And it is on Friday, the 18th, at the dock meeting. To that end, we can take some public comment now if we have some, but I think it might be better to do it in person on Friday. But I'm open to, or we're open to whatever the community wishes in that area. So what's the situation, Terry?
We have one public comment, or one person raising their hand. If you like, I'll go ahead and take this person.
Of course.
All right, so just reminding the public, you all have 3 minutes, and when at the 15-second mark, there will be a sound that means to please wrap up your last comment. So the first 2 speakers, Phil Sauter and Larry Minnekes. Go ahead, Mr. Sauter.
Yeah, I'm so grateful for the statements that the 3 retiring board members have made, and for the comments made by the remaining board members and by President Russell. One of my days of mourning, of course, was when Jared Huffman left the board, and we all know what happened to him. And I hope that the wind beneath his wings will find its way underneath your wings. And I was so glad to hear Director Schmidt and President Russell hold out the welcome mat for continued participation by the 3 board members who are leaving. And to the best of my ability, I'm going to try to encourage that as much as I can. I think that institutional knowledge has been just an incredible asset to the district and to the trust that's been built up in the community over many years. And thank you all.
Thanks, Phil.
Thank you. Mr. Larry Minnekes, please.
Oh, Cynthia, darn you, you made me cry. It's the best,
Aw, sorry, Larry.
the best compliment I can give, really. There's so much to say, and there's no way to really express. It's bittersweet this evening, and yeah, I plan to be there on the 18th. I actually plan to speak then. I just want to say what everyone has been saying. I agree 100%. And Cynthia, thank you so much. It's a thankless job. There are meetings where no one shows up, where no one speaks, you know, or one or two people show up, and people just don't know. And the criticisms that have been coming, this is what makes it bittersweet, is it's coming from people that just haven't been paying attention, don't know, really haven't understood the situation, the complexities of this, or our own involvement as a community, which I've tried to repeat over this process to people so that they understand as we go forward. You can't just point your finger at our leadership, because we are there to support and tell our leadership where we want to be taken. You know, we had opportunities, we had pipeline opportunities, we had opportunities in the past, and it was always, as we all know, it was always about growth and fear. And here we are today, and now it's about why didn't you do more? And it's just unfortunate that public didn't understand better how we got here, but at the same time, you guys have a lot to be proud of. You've done a tremendous job. You've put in so many hours and so much work, and it's probably one of the toughest jobs. It's certainly the toughest political job. I think it's tougher than supervisors in many ways. And I just want to express my appreciation for all your years, and thank you.
And thank you too, Larry, for all of your support and attention to the detail of running the water district.
I have three more speakers. Tom Boss, Marilyn Price, and Jake. Go ahead, Mr. Boss.
Yeah, good evening. I just wanted to also take this opportunity to thank the three directors that we're acknowledging here tonight.
Go ahead, Mr. Boss.
Hi, did you catch any of that, or?
No, go ahead.
Yeah, I just Tom Boss, I just wanted to kind of thank the three board directors we're focused on here tonight. Voice my appreciation for your openness to, you know, working with the community on some of the challenges and making our the watershed in particular a safer and more environmentally sensitive place. And yeah, each of you, you know, I really appreciate the time we've had working on some issues and finding common ground. And yeah, so anyway, I just wanted to thank you for your service.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Tom.
Okay, Ms. Price.
Yes, hi, everybody. I'm rather new to your water board, but I am very pleased to be here tonight. I now really realize how much you all do. I just turn on the water. And I just want to thank all of you. And I want to say a special thank you to Cynthia for kind of outlining a lot of what we all need to know. And I'm so glad you all record this, because I do want to share this meeting with other people. Thank you again.
Thank you,
Marilyn.
Thank
I
you.
really appreciate that.
Miss Jake, please.
Hi, I just wanted to take a moment and thank Director Kohler. We're so sorry to see her leave after 18 years. And I wanted to thank her for always advocating for conservation and making the mountain a safe place for hikers. So thank you, Director Kohler. We're so sorry to see you leave. And also thank you to the other directors, and good luck.
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.
I think Councilmember Catrano, then Roger Roberts. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you very much. Good evening, everybody. And I didn't know that this was going to be the meeting where this occurs, but yeah, I'm super touched to hear all of the comments that were shared by the various directors. And I just wanted to give so much thanks to Director Kohler and Director Bragman and Director Gibson for everything you've contributed to, as a fellow elected in Marin. I totally understand that a lot of the work goes unseen, and sometimes it can be thankless. But each of you are an inspiration to me as a young person in Marin that wants to serve my community. So I thank you in that regard. And I think one of the things that was a through line in all the comments is, and which was so beautiful to hear at a meeting such as this, is how much each of you see this work as being part of a team. Sometimes I think political things can feel kind of competitive, but to hear so many shout outs for the teamwork between the various directors and the staff, I think that's an incredible lesson for all of us to take away and put everywhere else in our lives as well. And I think it, just like One Water as a concept that Director Kohler just mentioned, it really is one team trying to figure out how the heck do we make this work in Marin County for the ratepayers and for the ecosystem that we depend on. So I thank you all again so much for everything you've done, and look forward to working with you all in whatever capacity we end up working together in the future. So thank you and have a good evening.
Thank you, Councilman Catrano.
Mr. Roger Roberts?
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Let me add my thanks to those of you who are moving on or moving out. Each of you brought different skill sets to the process at the board. And that was one of the things that made it a stronger board than you might expect for something as mundane as a utility. So thank you for that. I would hope that your successors in your various districts will use you as a resource and pass along your institutional knowledge, and it may require some outreach on your part, but I hope they'll be receptive because that's going to be important. So thank you again, and good luck.
Thank you, Roger. Thank you again for your time that you've invested in the Water District.
And the next two, Laura Sheraton and Baron Hamill. Go ahead, Laura.
Thank you. I just wanted to thank all you directors, Director Kohler, Director Bragman, and Director Gibson. I really appreciated your openness and listening to the issues, especially elevating the protection for hikers and really being receptive to the issues, as well as protecting all the animals who have no voice and constantly putting it out there when it seems like it might have been forgotten. Otherwise, I'm gonna miss you all. And so I hope you show up here and there and we get to work and talk and create better water sources, and while we're protecting the mountain. And it's a huge job. It's a huge responsibility with climate change, and you've done a fantastic job. So I commend you. Thank you.
Thank you again for all the time you've invested, and your comments have been very heartfelt and important to us.
And Ms. Baron Hamill, please.
Thank you. I doubt that I can articulate as eloquently as others have our appreciation for your hard work and commitment to our community. I doubt that the public fully appreciates what's involved in making water just appear when they turn the tap on. And that's just the tip of the proverbial iceberg. You've all done it with such style and grace. I know from my own experience, the pot shots that have been taken whenever I've had an editorial in the newspaper. I can't imagine what your lives have been like when they've been challenged by the public who has no appreciation for what's involved. So thank you again for your commitment to our community. You will be missed.
Thank you. And again, thank you for all the effort you put in, Ms. Hamill. We appreciate it very much.
It's been
There
my
are no-
pleasure.
There are no further speakers.
I'm just going to very quickly say thanks to everybody who spoke. My decision last spring not to run for reelection was a very personal one. I've just got a lot going on, and it seemed like I'd, been here for a while. But I just really want to say, since that time, I've just so appreciated everybody reaching out, and it's meant a lot to me. And I hope and expect that I will remain involved, maybe not in exactly the way that Chance is suggesting, but and others. But I am really looking forward to continuing to work with the community, and thanks for all the support.
And thank you again, Cynthia, for all your hard work. Just a comment of interest. I'm as a co-director, we're losing all of our lawyers on the directors. Three lawyers and 3 at once. It's incredible. I hope that impact can be survived. Very frankly, I'm not so sure that it can be so easily absorbed. So I have concerns about that, about where we're going because of the complexity of the subjects that we have to consider. Okay, well, I hope we see you all on Friday. It will be nice to actually see you all, not just see pictures of you. And let's see if we can have a little celebration and looking at the past and the future at the same time, that maybe we're around the corner with COVID. I hope so. Although I will be wearing a mask, and I would encourage others to wear a mask at the meeting. Obviously a personal choice, but there's still a risk there. So be aware of it. Okay. Thanks for everybody. And again, thanks for all of your hard work, the 3 of you. I can't even begin to imagine how difficult it's going to be going forward for us. I need a motion to approve the consent calendar.
I move approval. I did have a couple comments
Sure.
About it. So I saw we've got we're going to be amending our contract for the spillway evaluation. And I'm just wondering whether Jacobs would be willing to take a look at that, just to see how that would flow into any kind of spillway gate or raising the spillway concept that we've been discussing with the strategic water supply.
No pun intended, of course.
I didn't even catch my own pun. So
you said it would flow into the.
Oh, yeah. So that was just one thing that struck me. If we're going to be doing that kind of detailed analysis of the spillways, whether or not that could be used as sort of a foundation to move forward on that concept. And then the other thing was this is a little off topic, but on item 4, hiring an operator trainee, which I think is a great idea, so that you have continuity, just like what President Russell was talking about, continuity on the board, historic memory. Whether or not we couldn't consider doing that for the Rangers. In other words, could we start a Ranger trainee program where we would hire junior Rangers or maybe unsworn Rangers to get them ready to step into the shoes of a few of our Rangers that are going to be retiring in the next few years. So I just think that type of procedure, that type of process to kind of have people on deck, ready to step up into these difficult positions, that might be a good template for the Ranger program. So those are my comments on the consent calendar.
Excellent suggestion. Okay, any public comment?
There are none.
Okay, I need a roll call.
I'm sorry, I didn't catch who was the who was the person to second it.
I don't think we had one. I'll second it.
Okay, thank you. Vice President Schmidt,
Aye.
Director Bregman,
Aye.
Director Gibson,
Aye.
Director Kohler,
Aye.
and President Russell.
Aye. Okay, item 6, resolution securing exception to the 180-day wait period as provided for by CalPERS.
Good evening, Board of Directors. I'm Vicki Garay with the Human Resources Department, and I will be presenting item number 6. And with item number 6, staff is recommending that the board adopt 2 resolutions to secure an exception to the CalPERS 180-day wait period rule to rehire 2 who soon to be retired annuitants. So Gary Anderson, who has 36 years of district service, and Eric Westerman with 28 years of district service will be retiring in December. And they are both superintendent of operations in superintendent of operations position, excuse me. And with those 2, along with our treatment plant operator superintendent, they oversee the entire operation and maintenance of the water system. And so we would like to rehire them back as part-time annuitants. And in order to do so, we would need to have a resolution approved by the board. Bringing them back is going to allow for us to have some of that transfer of institutional knowledge, also to close some gaps, and also have an important D5 certification on staff. With that said, the employees again will work part-time for a temporary period of time, providing extra help. There is a correction to one of the resolutions, and that is for Gary Anderson, and we would like to hire him back effective January 2nd. So in order to make these happen, we ask that the board approve these resolutions to rehire.
Thank you, Vicki.
I just wanted to add a couple comments. As Vicki noted, these are critical positions, which is really what the board's doing in the resolution, identifying them and stating the critical nature of the positions so we don't have to do the waiting time that's typical of PERS. I would also say, as you see in the staff report, Gary, 36 years, and Eric, 28 years here. Just their willingness to do this, and talking to them, they're agreeing to do this to give back to the district, to help us with transition. And it just, to me, really speaks to who they are and really reflective generally of staff, of their commitment to have spent 37 and 28 years and then agreeing to see this through. So anyway, I just wanted to note that, and that their departure is a loss comparable with the departure we were just talking about. I mean, that institutional knowledge at a policy level and now at an operations level is significant, but we'll keep rolling, and the water's going to keep running, and they're agreeing to help us out to see that through.
And what's the long-term plan?
Yeah, so we're in a recruitment process, and we do have some strong internal candidates, but for positions like this, it's often good to go outside as well and really look for the best possible candidates. These are really just key positions. So they're the ones that oversee it and keep the water running 24/7, respond to emergencies, the whole thing.
Yes, they're extremely valuable, and no question about that. Any other board comment?
I just would maybe echo what I got dropped there for a second. I don't know, something happened in my Zoom connection. What Director Bragman had brought up, which is successional planning. I think to the extent that these extremely knowledgeable people who are doing us a great service to come back and help in a time when we need their skills and knowledge, but if we can make sure that as part of that, we are leveraging their time that we do have to help with successional planning, so that we have that transfer of knowledge and we're prepared for as people do leave and move on. It just is part of the nature of our work and all work. So if that can be part of what is done with their time, that would be really very helpful.
Thanks. Okay, any public comment?
There are none.
Okay, I need a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call.
Vice President Schmidt,
Aye.
Director Bragman,
Aye.
Director Gibson,
Aye.
Director Kohler,
Aye.
and President Russell.
Aye. Molly, do we need to address that change in the wording at all, or you got that under control?
I was just noting, and I will take, I think we can take the motion to assume the amendment that
Okay,
Vicky Garay did point out. So thank you for
okay.
that.
That's what we wanted to do. So
Yeah.
we may not have been very articulate in the way we did it, but that's probably because
I didn't
the
hear any
lawyers
concern
are-
or, yeah.
Yeah.
Didn't hear any concern or objection, so I think that we can take that resolution. as
Okay, great. Thank
Here.
you.
Oh.
Okay, well, go get them, guys. Number 7, amendment to professional services agreement for Jacobs.
Yeah, good evening. Paul Cellier, Water Resources Director. This item is the amendment to the professional service agreement with Jacobs, who are supporting the strategic water supply assessment. When we started this effort back in March of this year, we thought this was, our intentions were that this was going to be a rapid 3-month kind of roll up of existing studies that we've done on water supply, maybe touch up a couple of items, and 2 or 3 public meetings, and by June, July, we'd have sort of a roadmap outline for ourselves. 9 months later, I think it's safe to say that we changed course somewhere in there. And there are a number of factors that really, resulted in a very different approach to this project. It was interesting to hear Director Kohler in particular talk about public engagement, which we've seen in the work that we've been doing in the strategic water supply assessment. Initially, maybe 2 or 3 public meetings had been planned. To date, I think we've had 14 meetings dedicated on various subjects on that one project. So, and that's just the public meetings. Obviously, the team meetings weekly, twice a week, and emails and communications behind the scenes on all of the items that we've been talking about, on everything from public relations, right? How we bring this message to the public, how we share that information. And of course, we've benefited greatly from that public engagement. Not just from the public, but right as the board has participated in all of these meetings as well. The public and the board have challenged our assumptions in some cases, and in others, new ideas, new approaches to doing things. And that all makes this work more rigorous and rewarding. That said, though, those new ideas, of course, nothing comes for free. So when we have new ideas, there's additional work that Jacobs will have had to have done to support those new ideas. Not only new ideas, but a high level of detail. Originally, it was sort of going to be a very high level kind of flyover of water supply, kind of putting together a roadmap that would then go into greater detail on. But as we engage with the public and the board, the level of detail that was evident that we needed to really have a discussion on these items was far greater than we'd anticipated. And that again resulted in a greater level of effort from the Jacobs team. As an example, there are 6 main categories of the water management alternatives. And I won't go through all of them, but just to say that although there are 6 main categories, there are 37 sub-alternatives. So, we've put together a fairly big package of different water supply options for us to consider. And all of those, not all of them are new, but many of them are. Petaluma brackish desal, enlarging reservoirs really hadn't been something we'd thought about here at the district for, since 1983, right? And then dedicated conveyance of Sonoma water into Marin reservoirs. So those are just a couple examples of new items, but I think nearly half of the items of the 37 sub-alternatives are new. And so we're at the point now where the authorized budget for the project has been expended and additional funds are needed to complete the work, which we expect to do in January of 2023. So tonight, staff is requesting the board authorize the general manager to execute amendment number 1 to the professional service agreement with Jacobs, and not to exceed $219,070.
Okay, thank you very much. We're definitely in the mode of measure twice, cut once here. We need to hit this nail on the head, and Jacobs is a key player in ensuring we do that. I've been very pleased with their work, and I find them to be challenging colleagues in our efforts. Their knowledge of the North Bay system and of water resources in general is superior to anyone I've run into in a long time working in this business. So with that, any other board comments?
I mean, I think we need to do this. We're poised to act, and you know, we need to finish it up. And you know, I agree with you. You know, we're on the road, and we need to get to the end of the road. So I definitely support, you know, amending the contract to provide further funding.
Thank you. Anybody
Yeah.
else?
I'll echo
Go ahead,
that. I
Monty.
mean, we this is one of the most important things that we really are working on right now that will shape so much of our future effort that really matters. And so taking the time to respond to additional thoughts and questions and additional analyses, it doesn't surprise me that as we got into this, that we saw new alternatives that we wanted to explore. So we need to complete this. So I support us moving forward with this.
Thank you. Any public comment?
Yes, there are 2, Mr. Roger Roberts and Clayton Smith. Go ahead, Mr. Roberts.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm curious as to whether or not we're going to see in the final Jacobs engineering report risk weightings for the various options and alternatives that are going to be before the board and for analysis. And I recognize that some of those will be hard to quantify, but I think it's important that it be done nonetheless, even if it has to be done on a qualitative basis. So that's my question, and I hope that's already built into what they're going to be doing. But I haven't seen it in past presentations, and that's the only reason I bring it up. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Roger.
Mr. Clayton Smith.
Yeah. Hi, I was hearing Larry's comment about being, quote, ready to act. And that kind of made me concerned. I'm not sure exactly what is meant by ready to act, given the fact that there's now a general changing of the guard here with regard to the future of the water board that has just occurred. So I think I would like a little bit of clarity on what ready to act means. Do you actually have or have come to a conclusion as to what you're going to be doing moving forward? And are you going to do that before the new board sits and discusses it? Or are you going to be doing that presently? That's a question for me. And also, I would also like to look at the idea of this new board and to note the significance of an individual called Mimi Willard, who I think was probably the person most instrumental in the election results that have recently occurred. And I just think that's something that the management should take into account finding out a little bit about Mimi Willard, what her agenda is, because I think this is going to be materially important to you going forward. But again, I'd like to know what that ready to act means. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. The next two speakers, Councilmember Cutrano and David Bihar. Go ahead, Councilmember.
Thank you very much. And yeah, I just wanted to add my voice here as a group of electeds started to look into what we could do in our local jurisdictions to address water conservation and other water policy solutions. You know, we met with Paul and we met with others, and we had thought that it was going to be a couple month process, and then the timeline kept changing. And my personal opinion of it is I've been extremely impressed with Jacobs Engineering. I just concur with Chair Russell on that point. They seem extremely knowledgeable, and the additional time I think is going to definitely bolster whatever decision y'all ultimately come to, because it's clear a lot of time and research has gone into trying to identify the best alternatives and come up with the most robust assumptions. So I'm definitely supportive of this, and I'm grateful for all of the additional information and the extension of the timeline that Marin Water has given to this really important issue. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And Mr. Bihar, please.
Hi, everybody. I have a question that maybe everybody knows the answer to. If so, I apologize. And that is, when is the report going to come out? And then the follow-up to that is, given it's going to be lots of details, lots of options, as we discussed, this is a chance for me to mention that I thought Director Kohler's parting remarks were incredibly articulate and thorough and raised so many critical issues that we're all going to have to think about. So my follow-up question is, will the consultant team be available after the report comes out to answer questions and engage, or does their contract end when the report comes out? Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, the report is due, as Paul Sellier said, in January of 23. So a brief overview is, yes, we'll have a new board in place with two of us remaining. The decisions will be made by the board collectively going down the road. Yes, we will have the consultants available following the completion of the report, because there's a lot of steps that come after the completion of the report to inform the public and carry forward the information to make sure that we've got as many people on board as we can with the thinking process that's been put forth.
We do have one more speaker, Mr. Larry Minikis. Go ahead, Mr. Minikis.
I would just like to second Director Russell's comment and say it's the end of the beginning, and there's a long road ahead still. And that's really important for the public to understand, is that the district isn't going to be able to snap their fingers, and we're going to have solutions. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
sir.
you, Larry. Very well put.
Could I just add, my comment, ready to act, probably was more inartful than descriptive. I mean, I think we all understand it. It is the end of the beginning, and it's just going to launch us into a new phase, or it will launch the district and the public into a new phase of moving forward. So I apologize for that inartful comment.
Thank you. Any other comments?
There are none.
Okay, I need a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call.
Vice President Schmidt,
Aye.
Director Bregman,
Aye.
Director Gibson,
Aye.
Director Kohler,
Aye.
and President Russell.
Aye. Okay, thank you. And thanks again to Jacobs for all the hard work they've done. Okay, water supply update. You're back up, Paul.
I'm batting 1,000 at the moment. So I'll just bring up a presentation.
We'll see about that.
Yeah, I
Send us
know.
rain. Give me some rain. Then I'll pat you on the back.
Yeah. I could do that, I would certainly will. Our water supply update for this evening, we'll run through this pretty quickly. Not too much in the way of change in the water supply, but we'll take a look at it and some projections. And then just glance through the NOAA forecast to see if there's any of that rain out there, and a quick update on the strategic water supply assessment. Okay, rainfall. So a little different way of looking at rainfall. The chart on the left is just our monthly breakdown. You see in October of this year, we got no rain. So the gray bars represent our average rainfall since 1983. In October, no rain. Normally we get, 2.5 inches or so of rain in October. So far this November, we've got 2.5 inches or so of rain. Normally we'd receive close to 6. Last year at this time, we'd received 22.5 inches of rain, but we'd also received sort of a 100-year storm on October 21st. So a little different year to year. You can just see those huge variations that kind of get smoothed out as we start talking about averages. The chart below the blue bullets, this just shows the sort of distribution or frequency of rainfall. By sort of middle of February or so, we've had 80% or so of our rain has already fallen. So it's just kind of an interesting anecdote. So not a lot of rainfall, but we are still very early in the season in terms of when we would normally expect to receive the majority of our rainfall. Reservoir supply, on the other hand, we're doing fairly well. We're above average. We're sitting just above 55,000 acre feet or so. Conservation is still holding at around 25% compared to October of 2020. So we're beating the state's target of 15% reduction from that benchmark. And yet water use this year in 2022 is just a little bit higher than it was last calendar year. As we look at our storage projections, for those who haven't seen this chart before, the black line just represents the actual sort of historical reservoir level. And when we get to the dashed lines here, you'll see the green line representing sort of average rainfall, blue line about 50%, runoff. And then the orange line here is if we had a repeat of water year 21, which is a pretty severe year. As you can see, depending on which line we're going to follow, that'll be where we end. If we look at finishing the water year in 2023, you can see it's quite a wide range in terms of what the reservoir storage levels could be. And we're too early in the water year to really make predictions at this point. So predictions being sort of beyond my skill, I look to scientists like NOAA and national institutions like NOAA to see if I can find any information. And I'm just sharing this information with you. This is an 8 to 14 day outlook from NOAA. It's valid from 18th of November to the 24th of November. Temperature wise, there's indicating that we're going to be cooler, and I know we're all certainly feeling that lately. A little bit of frost on the ground in the mornings. And in terms of precipitation, not much help. It says it's near normal. So we're not expecting anything extraordinary in the next 2 weeks. There's a little bit of moisture, I think, rain indicated within the next 10 days, but it seems to be pretty light at the moment. As we look further out, at our last month, when we looked at these charts, the NOAA chart that was issued on September 30th, that was for October of 2022, indicated that in our area precipitation outlook, we had equal chances to be above or below. And their most recent release of this chart on October 31st, valid for November, indicates a slight improvement. So that the probability that we're going to have more than normal rainfall is just sort of slightly above, or as they phrase it, leaning above normal. So maybe that's a slight improvement there in the 30-day outlook. When we look at the temperature outlook, at our meeting in October on the water supply update, we were told, NOAA indicated that we were likely to be above normal in terms of temperature. And the most recent issuance shows that we have sort of this equal chance of being either above or below temperature. So, so probability outlook for temperature is sort of equal. As we really pan out and look at the next 3 months, NOAA are telling us that we have equal chances to be above normal and below normal. So again, there's no strong indicators one way or the other. And taking a peek at the strategic water supply assessment, the work underway, we talked about the technical report, and you'll hear in the next item 9 tonight, the Madaus review of the conservation water management alternative. And we're hoping to bring in early December initial portfolios and strategies for discussion with the board. So our schedule is then December for portfolios and strategies, and hopefully we'll get to the roadmap to the board in January. Summarizing then, the SWUSA, the Strategic Water Supply Assessment, is moving along. The technical report will be out. We'll probably have 2 phases of that technical report, with an early draft for a couple of chapters may be available in December, and then we'll complete the report in January. If we do see dry conditions persisting through December, then the operations team will likely start making preparations to pump Phoenix Lake and Sewell-Hooley Reservoir, which will mean renting a generator and moving it out there, getting ready to move that water into Nicasio. Reservoir storage is about 106%, so slightly above average for this time of year. We're looking at December 1st will be somewhere between 52 and 58,000 acre feet, and conservation levels remain relatively strong at this point. That concludes the water supply update for this evening.
Cool, thank you. Again, I think we owe a great vote of thanks to our users for conserving 25%. They're making our resources stretch much further than they would without that conservation. Okay, any other board comment? Okay, public comment?
Yes, there are 2, Clayton Smith and Phil Sauter. Go ahead, Mr. Smith.
Yeah, I want to go back to my favorite topic, the elephant in the room. On October 29th, I was up in Novato, and I came back, and when I was driving down Highway 101 back to Mill Valley, the sky was filled with aerosol spraying. I mean, it was remarkable how many aerosols and how many chemtrails were all over the area of Southern Marin and down towards the Golden Gate. And I'm certainly not alone in seeing these things. And so I found it very interesting that the following several days we had the first precipitation genuine precipitation for months. And the connection between the two to me is getting increasingly apparent, that some kind of weather modification is going on. And I think that this needs to be, this challenges, for one thing, the whole notion of predictability of weather. And the other is given the fact that there's so much secrecy in science now in the country we're living in, particularly masked behind the Defense Applied Research Project Association and what they're doing, that I feel that our life conditions are actually somewhat at risk here. And I would hope that someone would be brave enough in the business of water provisioning to actually reach out and find out what they're doing and what is in the aerosol spraying and how would that possibly affect our weather. And I would like to, maybe when you have personal in-person meetings again, I'm going to bring up to your meeting room a speech given by John F. Kennedy, who was assassinated some years ago, to the United Nations 60 years ago, what he gave a speech on the promise of weather modification. And just after that speech, Lyndon Baines Johnson gave a speech on that topic at a university somewhere in the United States. So this is something that's been going on now for 60 years. And I think given what I'm witnessing and people all over the world now are witnessing, I think that, and the risks we're facing today with our water supply, somebody in the business should get the courage to deal with it. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Mr. Sauter, please.
Yes, on the water conservation number, it went by a little bit quickly, but I think we continue to use the month this year versus the month last year. And I'm wondering, since there are such great variations from year to year for a given month, if maybe we would want to restate that conservation number on a longer time frame, such as this quarter versus last quarter, or the previous 3 months of this year versus the same 3 months of last year. I think that might give us a little bit more accurate idea of what we're actually doing. Thanks.
Thank you. There are no further comments.
Okay. Well, thank you for an excellent update, Paul. Okay, number 9.
I'm afraid you're stuck with me just for a moment more. I have just a brief introduction this evening. So we have Madaus Water Management with us this evening, who were asked to take a look at conservation that we've included as part of the strategic water supply assessment. And just a couple quick sort of pre-programming notes on that. So water conservation that's included in the strategic water supply assessment is distinct and separate, sort of a subset of the district's ongoing long-term conservation program. And the incentives that we've included in the strategic water supply assessment, really, they're developed looking at the history of the incentives and consideration in our conservation plan is not new. It's been around a while. So we're looking at things like whether the market's saturated, and of course, how these incentive programs behaved in the most recent drought. And we know that whether conservation programs are effective or how much water they're going to save really depend on the level of participation that you're going to achieve. And so staff have really, looked at the level of savings that we'd expect from participation in the incentive programs that we've included in the strategic water supply assessment, and based that on our experience in terms of the performance of those programs within the district, performance of those programs in other Bay Area agencies, and of course, from perspectives, provided by nationally recognized experts, such as the team we have helping us look at our conservation as part of the strategic water supply assessment this evening. So we're fortunate to have Madaus Water Management, Michelle Madaus and Lisa Madaus are joining us this evening to provide us their review of our conservation element that's included in the strategic water supply assessment. So I'll hand it over to Michelle, I think, who's got a presentation for us this evening.
Great. Thank you, Paul, for the introduction, and thank you for having me here this evening. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and hopefully everyone can see this.
Your audio is not very good, Michelle.
Oh, okay. Let me get a little bit closer. I can also mic up if I need to mic up. Is that better?
Yes.
Okay. If I need to add a microphone, I will do so. Just let me know. Thank you very much for having me here this evening. I'm really looking forward to having a great discussion. I have a presentation and will be available for questions as well.
Michelle, you're still a little bubbly. It's still a little hard to hear you.
Let me add a microphone and see if that is one moment.
I'm not sure it's your microphone. It seems like your connection is a little choppy.
Oh.
I mean, it could be your microphone, but
We're all streaming the Artemis launch, don't you know? We're engineers with kids that are like engineer techie types.
Well, I can hear you okay, Lisa. So,
Yeah.
I hear Lisa fine.
okay, hold on just a minute. Let me see if the microphone helps out.
Because my husband's at the city council meeting at his office for the city of Sacramento. Else we'd have even more streaming going on. But actually we're maxed out. Can't get higher at our house.
All right, is this any better?
That's a lot better.
Yes.
Okay, mic'd up. Here we go. Take two. All right. Well, thank you for having me here this evening. I'm really excited to be back presenting in front of the board. So we're going to go over a few things tonight, and then we'll be available for any questions as well. So we're going to go over the purpose of what we've been asked to do by the Marin staff. A little bit of who we are. A lot of you know who we are, but if not, we'll give a brief overview. And then we'll talk about the process that we went through to review the information and also what material we were provided to review. Talk a little bit about the conservation saving results. Lisa will be presenting with me. She will be covering some of the water loss findings. And then we'll go over some conclusions and again, available for any questions. So moving forward, we were understanding that Marin has been focused on strengthening their water resiliency through their strategic water supply assessment. It does include the water conservation element, and it definitely includes both passive and active incentive programs. And so we were asked by the district to do a peer review of the savings, what was assumed, and the participation level in the water conservation assessment. So we were asked to provide a conservative, reliable assessment. We were not asked to go aggressive or above and beyond. And so everything that we're saying is in that context. I did want to include and start with a little bit of a historical perspective and picture. We basically start our story here. We have been working, it's a little bit on the next slide too, but we have been working with the district since 2006. And we started this graph back then. And since then, it's been a really interesting story. And we have been basically adding material since then. But I like to just bring this up as context because sometimes you have a year like 2021 or you have a year like the pandemic and they're very dramatic. But I like to kind of step back a little bit and kind of put it into the context and the big picture of what we're talking about and what we've experienced. So we're looking at over 125 years worth of data on this graph. And there's 4 key things on here. The green line is the actual population line. And historically, the population would go up and demand would just follow it. That's kind of how things went historically. But you can see the green population line just continues to grow. And then the red line is actually the production for the system. So you can see it really did start to follow in the beginning part of the service area history. And then they start to diverge. The population continued to grow, whereas the water production did not. It kind of capped out. And then it's been interesting that we've had these events, and those are layered on top. Rainfall is along the bottom. Those are the bars of the rainfall. And you can see that we've had some droughts, and they're highlighted here. A couple takeaways. One is the severity of them, and it kind of puts the context of a little bit of what happened in 2021. It also puts into context the frequency of events that we've had. You can see on the left, there's kind of big gaps between the lines, and then on the right, they're much, much closer together. And I have all of the droughts in kind of a light pink color, but then we also start having these yellow lines coming in. We had a recession and we've also had COVID, and then now we have COVID drought. So it's been a really interesting dynamic period, to be honest. And you can see the water use kind of reacts accordingly. So as we're talking about it, this is the stage that we're looking for as we move forward into the future. So I like starting there. I like starting the discussion there because the question is, you know, where are we going from here? What's normal? What is normal? You know, is there such a thing as normal? So when we're looking at supply reliability, I like to start with that. I also did want to give a compliment to Marin and all the efforts that they have been putting in. You can see they kind of had a lot of peaks, but then didn't keep growing, and they have actually been declining and getting more efficient in water use, even though the population, the green line to the right, has continued to grow. So I did want to thank a lot of the board members. I have known you for many, many years and enjoyed working with you and presenting in front of you. So thank you to the 3 board members that are leaving for having us and having us back again. And I commend you for having worked so hard, and the data does show it. As the red line has continued to drop, the efficiency has been made a priority. Marin has been a leader over time and really did have a good conservation program since the first conservation master plan we helped with back in 2007. So with that as context, I did want to say thank you to all of the decisions that have been made over time to make this possible. And so we move on to the next chapter. That's the discussion today, right? So that's where we've been. That's a good context and history. But as we move forward, you know, I do like starting there so that we can continue that discussion. We are low today. There was the rainfall you can see off on the far right. That was definitely low in 2021. And Paul just gave a nice summary that we're low-ish so far. We're not at 22 inches like we were last year, but every single year has its own flavor and its own rainfall pattern and production accordingly. So with that being said, I am Michelle Medaus from Medaus Water Management. Lisa and I work as a team. We have worked with Marin since 2006 on numerous projects. We are a family-owned business in the Bay Area. We're an engineering firm. We are a small business and a women-owned business. We have completed over 500 conservation models in 30 states. We work nationally and internationally. We have a model in New Zealand as well right now, which is pretty fun. But we do and have been based in the Bay Area. We were born and raised here and grew up here. So we have very much knowledge on the change in seasons and weather, and definitely have been following the area for quite some time. And we are widely recognized as experts in the industry. And you can see off to the right that we write a lot of publications. We really do believe in this field and how we're changing, adapting, trying to work together. We're all on the same team, really ultimately to be efficient with the resources we have and deliver a good quality, reliable source to our entire community and the entire region in the Bay Area and also in California. So what were we asked to do? We were asked to do mainly 3 things. Over the last few weeks, we were asked a couple questions. So for context, we were asked, what about the savings? Are they too high? Are they too low? Are they about right? Are there additional opportunities? So Lisa on our team is an AWA water loss validator, so she helped on the water loss piece as well, and she will be speaking to that. So that's on there too. We were also asked to look at the participation rates, like how many, too high, too low, about right, and then ultimately provide some recommendations. Do we think that these values are something that we can count on for the service area, and do we have any additional recommendations? So we will be addressing these as we go through this presentation. So what were we provided to review? We were provided a list here, but basically we were provided some workbooks. There was no memorandum or report per se, but we were provided data. And then of course we have background information. We had our own, the Alliance for Water Efficiency Tracking Tool was used most recently. We had the DSS model, which is a similar yet separate model that we had developed back in 2019. So it was nice. We had a comparison and context to use. We helped on the 2015 Urban Water Management Plan in 2005. So we in 2010, so we have that kind of our mind. We also had a 2020 Urban Water Management Plan as a resource. We were given recordings of the board meetings and kind of background and got to see Carrie's presentation and Peter Mayer's and all their information as well. Definitely used industry reports, and then staff provided a lot of great data. We asked a lot of questions and got a lot of information from staff, and they were very, very helpful through the entire process. And we did have a series of 4 meetings, so we were able to have a dialogue, go back and forth. It was definitely not done in a vacuum, and so we do feel that as we were looking at the data, we got good context and to helpfully make some good observations and recommendations. So it's a big table, but it should be somewhat familiar. So Carrie Pollard presented this at a previous meeting. And so we took the information and kind of replicated it here. So the annual participant, so there was about 8 different measures on the left that were included on the projected conservation element. The annual participation that was proposed is in the middle column, the one that starts with AMI leak detection at 1,250 letters per year. That entire column is what was proposed moving forward. So our job is to look at that and decide, does that look realistic? Should it be higher? Should it be lower? Why or why not? For context, we have historical data to the right. So pre-drought is kind of what we would consider more, I'm not sure there is a normal, but more normal than 2021, where there was a lot of extra efforts and extra funding being put and extra temporary staff in place due to the 2021 drought experience. The unit cost, dollars per acre foot, were provided, and then cumulative water savings. So this is the table we really focused on. We did focus our energy on these particular efforts, and we will be providing comments on each of these 8 elements. In addition, we also looked at water loss. We'll be talking about that as well. So we're going to step through them one at a time. So AMI leak detection, the saving estimates, they assumed 100% of average home leaks are resolved. We typically, when they actually give them a leak program, they're saying, we're going to call you up, we're going to look at this information, and we're going to resolve the leak. We come in slightly sometimes more conservative, where we say we're going to save 20% of internal and external over time, because we use a longer term period. Marin looks at it like a short-term fix. And so we have slightly different approaches. But overall, when we look at how they approached it and only counted the savings for a short time, it does actually in the end seem reasonable. We just have slightly different time periods that we look at when we look at leaks and leak savings. We do think that 1,250 leak letters is definitely reasonable for the 5,000 meters. However, we do recommend that once the system is fully installed, that the number of leak alert letters and efforts should increase over time. But it is conservative for now to assume 1,250 is possible with the 5,000 meters that are installed. Non-functional turf, Marin assumed 700 non-functional turf properties per year. They assumed 1.7 million square feet of non-functional turf. And so we found that the savings and assumptions to be reasonable. The participation estimates, they assumed 70,000 square feet per year, or that equates to about 4% per year for context. And so we were saying that it could ideally be increased if ordinances or policies are put in place. There are some other agencies that have been doing non-functional turf. They're young, I would say, in concept, but if staffed and if enforced, it could potentially yield more non-functional turf removal. So for the water conservation evaluation, we're going to keep it steady and say that what they proposed is very conservative and realistic. I'm also going to layer on that additional opportunities could be possible to increase participation if ordinances or enforcement are added on top of it. So we're always going to provide 2 perspectives, where the number is realistic for the conservation element and, you know, what could additionally be provided. So is it possible?
Michelle, I have a
Yes.
question.
Go ahead, Larry. Yes.
LADWP just announced they're going to $5
Yes.
a square foot.
Yes.
Do you, how do you evaluate that here to see what would happen if we increase the incentive?
We were not asked to do an increased incentive amount like that. We absolutely could do so. Yes, and when you put more money on the table, it does get more attractive for most people. So it's like offering, I like to equate it like a movie ticket. If I offer you for like a $10 movie, if I offered you $1, you're gonna be like, maybe, but I got other things to do. If I offer you $2, $3, $4, maybe. If I start saying, hey, you want to go to the movies for $6, $7 out of $10, you're like, where do I start? You know, when does it show? So I think as you increase funding, then absolutely it's gonna get more people interested. So we did not analyze that as part of this, or weren't asked to do so. But if we were asked to do so, we'd be happy to do so.
Okay, thank you.
Not a problem. So yeah, you sweeten the deal, basically, is my executive summary to that. And questions are always welcome. So, all right. The next measure we looked at were residential turf conversion. So the saving estimates were about 15 to 37 million square feet of turf. That's a big range. The reason it's a big range is because there is a lot of canopy in Marin's surface area, lots and lots of trees. So using aerial photography, it's great. It's also a little limiting when you don't really know what's underneath the trees. And so unless you go like manually out and estimate everything, it can create quite a range. But that's the current range of square foot of turf available in the service area. The savings estimates were based on local data from North Marin and Santa Rosa. There was Alliance for Water Efficiency Landscape Transformation Study. So that study was well funded, well peer reviewed, and well accepted, not only locally, but in the country. So the savings estimate was found to be reasonable, and it's nice that it had local data. So we found that the 100,000 square feet turf is reasonable. It's about 125 sites per year or 10 per month. I call that reasonable for your water conservation evaluation. Could it be higher, like Larry just asked on this one? Yes, it could. But again, you would need to sweeten the deal and also have staff, to be able to do that. So like we saw in the drought, you went up to 400 in an extreme case, or if you ever give it drought funding, then yes, you could theoretically get higher. And I know even in the 2021 drought, you had even additional programs where you would come out, mulch people's yards, and do the work for them. That also makes it sweet. It's not just the money, Larry, to your comment, but it's also, it's almost like a direct install program. So if you offered or tried to offer that again, then that cost for the district would go up, but you could theoretically do more. But for a base assumption, the 100,000 square feet we think is absolutely reasonable and achievable. And therefore, for our purposes, for the water conservation element, we're not recommending any changes. Pool covers. So pool covers are a little bit tricky. So the saving estimate from Marin was assumed at 41 gallons per day per pool cover. Historically, we've rarely modeled pool covers in Northern California. The challenge we've been finding, we also do commercial water audits. We do, work with customers in the field, and we found that the pool cover concept is great and they can work. The challenge that we're faced with is a lot of the usage of the pool cover varies. During the summer, people actually want to use their swimming pools, and therefore they leave the cover off. And during the summer is when it's the warmest and when you get the highest evaporation, therefore the highest potential for the water savings. So the savings that we saw are estimated to be too high because what we see is that people don't actually, unfortunately, use the covers as much as possible. And Marin had assumed 90 pool covers per year. And so we also thought that might be high moving forward. You may have gotten some during the drought, but overall, this program tends to struggle with participants sustainably. So what we're recommending is if you want to look just at reliable water savings, we might remove this particular element because it's highly variable and based on participation and usage rates. There are a lot of really successful programs, but we have worked with other utilities, and it's actually quite rare to have pool covers as you look up and down and kind of around the region, and I think that's why. So yeah, I mean, it's a good program, but the savings are a little bit hard to count on sometimes. All right, smart irrigation controllers. The estimates were 10% of the savings on irrigation water data based on the actual flume data from the service area. So being that we based it on flume local data, we found it to be reasonable. We looked at what we had assumed in our 2019 work, and a 10% savings from irrigation water is kind of similar to the approach that we use. And just enhancing it with flume data in the region can only make it more, realistic for your particular service area. Marin assumed 100 per year, or 2,930 for the entire duration of the program out to 2045. We think that this might be a little bit low in our opinion because over time there are regulations going to be put in place, and the three key areas that the regulation, I'm talking about the Making Conservation Way of Life regulation, the ones that are starting, I think at this point they keep pushing it back, but we think it's going to start in 2024 to be enforced, really have three key areas that they're looking at. One of them is landscape, one of them is commercial use, and the third one is water loss. So being that that's going to be a focus of the state and a focus of the region, we do think that the popularity of this program will be maintained over the years, and that the uptake of the controllers and the sophistication of the technology will just continue. Therefore, we're recommending to double the rate of this particular measure from 100 to 200 per year, especially if you start adding additional elements to your region, and turf replacement. It just kind of goes that it would follow. And you also have a CAP program we're going to talk about in a minute, your commercial assistance program, that this would be a nice complement to be able to work with the turf removal, and also be able to have a smart controller for the new landscapes that you're putting in. So I think these are complementary programs and therefore work well together. So we're recommending to increase the participation. Conservation Assistance Program. This one is the residential surveys. So Marin assumes a 6.5 gallons per day saved per residential survey for indoor and outdoor. On our side, we typically assume more savings per survey. The 6.5 is more like an indoor survey. We typically assume about 7.75 for an indoor only survey. So the outdoor survey actually is not necessarily counted in here. We discussed it with staff, and they said that they were trying to be conservative, that they had a lot of other outdoor programs going on. However, we do feel that there is some, behavioral element to things, and not all of the outdoor water savings are just going to be captured by your turf replacement and your controller program. There can be additional savings per site. So we do think that the 500 surveys per year is reasonable. And as you hopefully transition into AMI meters, that there will be additional staff able to address questions. And hopefully we will be able to target our survey efforts. So even though we have more AMI and a lot of customers, 500 is not a lot, but we do think if you use remote information and you have remote access to all these meter reads, that therefore you could try and answer some of the questions over the phone. A lot of agencies are already doing this in the Bay Area and doing it successfully. So therefore we could theoretically target who's getting a house visit and who's not. As we know, house visits are costly and time intensive for staff, but they are warranted in some cases when we do see information and data that can't be addressed, remotely. So we do think going out to the house and working with them is a good idea, and it should be kept as a long-term, not only water efficiency measure, but also customer service measure. And we should increase those water savings to about 10 gallons per day per survey to capture more outdoor savings. We actually use 20 outside and 7, so we use more like 27. So this is in between those two periods. So it captures some of the outdoor, but not as aggressive because there are other landscape measures at work throughout the other programs as well. So it's kind of a little bit in a balance in between. All right. Landscape to laundry, gray water kits. Marin uses local flume data for inefficiency, and it was assuming 31 gallons per load. We typically actually assume that the machines have been changing out a little bit quicker. The life of a washing machine at this point is assumed to be like 6.7 years, almost 7 years. So they don't last that long anymore. Unfortunately, our washing machines are lasting less and less. And therefore, the technology is changing out as we have been getting new machines. The requirements on the energy washing machines have been changing over time. So now we assume an inefficient machine is actually 15 gallons per load, and an efficient machine is actually 6. And we continue to go down that direction. So we think that those savings are a little bit too high. So Marin was assuming 40 landscape to laundry conversions per year. And then we found that other agencies actually, unfortunately, struggle to get participation in this program. There will be some people that express interest, they can come to workshops and come to meetings, but when it actually comes to participation, I have a lot of programs that are dramatically struggling to the point of some have none, some have two. You know, they're just this program is a great concept, but it's struggling on the implementation. When they actually go to implement this program, they're not having as many as some people would like to actually fully implement this program and get the systems installed. For this factor and only this reason, we recommend removing it due to the highly variable participation. I do think you can include the measure as part of, you know, education and keep using it as a measure, but in terms of relying on it and those savings, we kind of, like I said, focused our efforts elsewhere, increasing your turf efforts and increasing your smart controllers because this program has just not maintained regular participations that we've seen in other service areas locally. Rain barrels. So rain barrels have been around for a while. Marin assumed 1,500 gallons per barrel per year savings. The saving estimates appear reasonable, but the overall saving 1,500 gallons per barrel when you have a 750 gallon barrel is not a lot of water. And as we saw in Paul's presentation, it depends on the rain year. So some years you may save a lot, but like this year we didn't get any rain in October and we only have 2-point-some inches in November. So these rain barrels are most effective in the shoulder seasons. So you can fill them up and keep emptying them. But if the rain doesn't come, then we're not able to use them obviously as effectively. We found that the number is reasonable, but overall the total water savings were small. So we would recommend including this measure. We do recommend funding the measure, but we would recommend put this in like an outdoor water savings effort and to seek like what we're going to call impactful ways to connect with the community to encourage water savings. We do think that it's a good education for people to see the rain barrels fill and how fast it gets emptied. I've worked a ton and actually lived in Australia and seen how powerful they can be. But it is overall a question of reliability as we get year to year. And you saw the fluctuations in rainfall and then also how many we're doing, that it just isn't a large volume overall. So.
And I think the other thing, Michelle, that need to be pointed out is that when it rains, you don't need them.
That is
so you're
correct.
able to fill them.
Yes, absolutely correct, Larry. Yeah, we have very successful programs. We worked with Honolulu Board of Water Supply for quite some time, and they have a lovely program. But Hawaii, Honolulu Board of Water Supply gets rain all year round. And so they're able to fill them and empty them and fill them and empty them. It's a very sustainable program. They get barrels shipped over with chemicals from the water treatment plant. They empty them, clean them, and then give them to the customers so they don't have to ship them back, right, on a boat to dispose of them. So in some senses, this is absolutely a beautiful program. But yes, same in Florida, we have some successful programs. The challenge in California is that we don't have that same weather pattern. So Eller is correct. It fills in the winter and they stay full, but we don't, the plants aren't thirsty at that time. And then the spring rolls around and we empty it, but we don't get the rain. So that's the challenge.
And how much of a concern is vector control?
Is what?
Mosquitoes.
Control? Oh, mosquitoes. Oh, mosquitoes. Oh, yes. Health and safety. Yeah, loves to talk about that. It can be a maintenance challenge if someone gets the rain barrels originally and likes them and then kind of over time starts ignoring them. It can lead to that. I do recommend to consider that as people are keeping these around and keeping standing water around. It kind of depends. There are some successful programs and people that have them and do quite well. I'm not worried about them. It's the others that don't. But yeah, my grandmother had about 25 buckets. She lived in Palo Alto in her backyard and used them all the time, and she didn't have a problem. So it just depends. That's a true story. She had them for many, many years and never had an issue. So it just depends on the person and how they're maintained. So I grew up with them. I grew up watching them, and they can work quite well. So any other questions, Larry?
No.
Okay, great. So, all right. Real water loss reduction. So we're basically going to switch to Lisa, and Lisa's going to take us through the assumptions and the savings and some suggestions. So, Lisa.
Thanks, Michelle. Good evening, Paul. I have 3 slides to talk to you about water loss. I'm going to talk a little bit about the basis of what I reviewed with your water system audits. As Michelle mentioned, I'm a water system audit validator. I've actually prepared audits since 2004, and 3 years ago, the state started certifying people to validate and come in and look kind of at a desktop level on data that's been provided. So I didn't even do that level of a review, but these have already been validated third party. So I was just to give you a brief overview. The basis of the world water loss reduction is founded on, the quantification of your non-revenue water there in the row down below. It's in the medium blue. And Marin Municipal was sharing with us that in your urban water management plan that in 2045, you see 2,830 basically and change acre feet per year, and that they were assuming a 10% savings. So the question was, how realistic is that? And that's embedded in your 4,009, the projected savings. So 283 acre feet per year of the 4,000 is connected to real water loss reduction, which is physical water. There's also in water system audits, the apparent losses, which are paper losses, which in this context for water supply assessment is not what we're looking at. But this is the basis. And so this, if you want to go to the next slide, Michelle.
And we can note 106 gallons per capita per day, because this might come up in discussions and questions about where we're landing. So I will pull that off of this particular slide as an add-on. So in 2045, the total DPC assumption is 106 gallons per capita per day, because that may come up as we talk. So I will point that out on this particular slide as well before we move on.
And what is RHNA?
RHNA. So it's Regional Housing Needs Assessment or Allocation. So yeah, it's I think you're 11,000 units, don't quote me on that, for the Marin area. It's that's been incorporated into these projections.
That's state mandated law. Yep.
Yes.
Yeah, we know what it is. I just wanted to make sure everyone knows what it is.
Yep. All right, so that's the basis of what was published. And then here, this slide is really my observations based on your water system audit. So we compiled a table over on the right of the 4 most recent audits, which have been submitted to the state, on time, reviewed, were considered as part of the state water loss performance standard. The state in October and September has released and approved reduction targets related to system water audits. Marin actually meets the target. You have no assigned reduction target from the state at this time. They perceive that your level of loss is within compliance. I will talk you through a little bit the numbers on the right on why. So you can see the real losses, your total water supply, just for context at the top. Your real losses in the bold, that's the quantity that we're looking at. Now, all real losses are not recoverable, right? You have a pressurized system. It's designed to leak, actually, because you don't want low quality water infiltrating your system. So all systems leak. The question is, how much might be recoverable? There is a formula related to the unavoidable annual real losses. That's the other bold line down there. That is a calculated formula. It is heavily dependent on pressure, which is your bottom line there at 109 PSI. When you look at the second to the bottom row, which is the infrastructure leakage index, is close to 1. And what that means is basically that your numbers, like 1,800 compared to real losses compared to unavoidable annual losses, are pretty close together. They're almost 1. In fact, they're 1.0 in 2018. We look at 2019, 2021 in a drought year is not really a realistic year to kind of benchmark any normal savings. There you have lower water use, higher pressures often in the system and background losses. So I didn't really look very detailed at 2021. I was actually looking more 2019. It's more of a normal water year. Is there realistic losses? You're already operating pretty close to your current annual oil losses related to, you know, what they perceive to be unavoidable annual oil losses. So in other words, the takeaway is not a lot of room to find, you know, real losses. Looking at the data from here. Now that is with your existing infrastructure. So, and that's just being those weeps and seeps and minor leakage. That is driven heavily, as I mentioned, by pressure. So so we need to look at, is there opportunities for pressure reduction? It's one of the main mitigation measures when you're looking to lower real losses. You have existing leak detection and repair ongoing, but finding more leaks, you know, is not the answer. When I see numbers like this, that is probably need to consider long-term system changes. So you're talking more infrastructure changes, more pressure reducing valves. There's new technology that goes along with those, and having a more sophisticated look and study actually of your system water losses. And predicting and analyzing your pressure, your system pressure, and if there's improvements that you can make there. So that's the takeaway is your system's operating fairly efficiently. The 283, you basically need to continue with your infrastructure improvements plan. You can actually go to the next slide. There's a handful of things that I would focus on in terms of reducing your real losses and meeting that 283 and perhaps exceeding it. One is that you look at reclaiming flushing volumes. Now those are dialed back or curtailed. I understand from Paul that you weren't doing it during the drought. That's normal. But when you regain and have more normal supplies and regain system flushing, that you look at perhaps the no DES system, which stands for no discharge elimination system. It's essentially a hydrant to hydrant hookup with a treatment system skid mounted on a semi-truck trailer. Hillsborough and some other systems in the Bay Area do that. It's not always feasible, but my suggestion was to review that and consider it. It's not going to be a high volume of water, but it is a place to recycle water. It is being done effectively and took a long time actually to pilot with public health and get it approved. You need to continue with your prioritized leak repair and your main replacement in order to maintain your level of loss and produce a reduction. And particularly if you want those background losses, to get at the background losses, the small weeps and seeps, that's going to be main replacement. So if you want to accelerate, then you need to accelerate the main replacement and maintain those main. And with high system pressure on aging infrastructure, that just puts more stress on the system. It's just like your own high blood pressure in your blood, right? It's just the more pressure you're going to put on your system, the more at risk you are and liability for breaks. And so there's actually added risk and reliability benefits beyond just reclaiming real water losses. And many focus on it from that perspective too, from a reliability and risk liability in containing that. I am suggesting, and this is to conduct a pressure study and to do, you know, an in-depth look on your infrastructure. I understand that you're you're gravity fed, which means that you're going to be challenged, and it's going to take some creativity on what you can do with your infrastructure, any pressure reducing valves. I gave Paul a couple of suggestions of cities and that have done some work in this area. So there is some potential that I perceive, but you really would need a study. And I also brought up that with smart controllers, you're going to shave your spring and fall peak, but you're also building in a sharper peak on irrigation in terms of your peaking of your system. And we know that nighttime ET is rising. That also is driving up irrigation demand on the peak. So I think a pressure study is warranted, and I would do that and suggest you do it before what's called a level 3 analysis. So the water system audits and the level 1, like desktop review. Level 3 does much more detailed, what's called a component analysis, and includes a cost assessment. It would be the level of analysis that would get you to like capital improvement budgets, what infrastructure projects would really make the difference. on this. And I understand that Marin said, oh, we already have a grant for that. So definitely pursue and complete that. I was really happy to hear that you're on that track. And so the suggestion is to do a pressure study in advance of that. It will give you more robust answers out of your level 3 component analysis. There is, with the 1-to-1 on the pressure study, you know, you can reduce, there's on the potential of a few hundred acre feet. We're not talking thousands of acre feet, as you saw on the table before. So you have more questions on that, you can ask me, but that's my high level assessment of it.
Those are excellent comments. I particularly like, well, two of them. The DES system, I think, is a no-brainer. Do they rechlorinate on the way back in?
Yeah, Paul mentioned too that I think you're a chloramine system, so I mean that's,
Yeah, we
you're
are.
gonna need to
Get a little fancier. Yeah.
believe SFPSC is chloramine too, so I believe Hillsborough would probably work that out, but you would need to investigate that, yeah, that it is feasible for your system.
And your comments about the pressure are extremely interesting. You're correct. We have 140 tanks, so we have 140 pressure zones. Basically the same as East Bay Mud, but only 1/10 of the customers to spread the cost out on. But where I live, for instance, is at the bottom of Ring Mountain. So we have 135 PSI feeding us, which means that every house has a pressure reducer. So, you know, if we were to break the pressure, and I don't know what the potential is here, but one of the systems over on the Ross side, there was actually a low head hydro put in to make the PRV instead of using PRVs. I don't know that these are big enough to do that. They probably aren't, but it's something to think about. And I think these are excellent comments. And it's one of those things you kind of just don't think about, especially when you've got to pump up to the tank anyway to serve the people at the top of the hill. And then you kind of just, whatever happens on the way down. Huh?
That's right.
But it's a very, very, very interesting comments.
Yeah, thank you. I agree. I have a number of, I mean, I can say more, but it's late.
Yes,
this is a topic
agree.
that
we got more coming after this.
Yeah.
So.
Yep.
But East Bay Mud did study it at length, along with the energy savings. So there's greenhouse gas savings, energy savings,
Of course.
hydro regen. I mean, and the new technology, the variable pressure relieving valves and things in terms of reliability has gone up. The technology's gotten a lot better. So,
How are they doing with chloramines? Because we're running into a real problem in the city of San Francisco with deteriorating PRVs. I mean, we're out of the watch units, we're getting about 6 months to a year, and the diaphragms are gone. Have you run into that problem?
the one in particular I'm thinking of is not a chloramine system, so that's a fair question. And one that we can collaborate with Paul. That's that's one of the benefits of connecting with us is we have a large Rolodex. I know who I would call to answer that question.
Sure.
Yep.
Okay, cool. Thanks.
Sure.
All right. If there are any other water loss related questions, we'll move on. So in the interest of time, we only have 2 more slides. There's not a lot more. So we brought it back. We decided to summarize it here. We kind of stepped through them one at a time, but this is kind of a summary of the measures we were looking at. And again, we were asked to look at the savings and the participations and the recommendations. And so basically we worked with Marin staff and we fed all this information back to them and we said, okay, here's our recommendations. They did see them. They, heard, our suggestions and recommendations and even took it one step further and said, okay, that looks, okay, let's go ahead and rerun our models with these additional assumptions. So that's basically where we went next. So for example, on smart controllers, they increased them from 100 to 200. So they went ahead and made these changes to their program. And so we could see what the net change would be because we wanted to bring that back to you because you're like, okay, well, great, you have all these savings. Well, what does it do? Right. So that's basically the bottom line is how does it go?
Michelle, could you go back for 1 second?
Oh, yes.
I just want to clarify. Yeah. So the savings estimate and the participation estimate, that's just based on, just to make sure, that's just based on what Marin municipal staff was telling you they were going to invest. Like this is again, not
Yes.
an optimization of what we could be doing. This is just given the assumptions you were provided by the team about spend,
Correct.
right? Current, you know,
Yes.
staffing and spending. So this is not necessarily what's reasonably feasible. This is just what's reasonable given the level of spending you were given.
That's correct. Yes. And given the context information, yes. And that,
Reasonably reliable, I think we would
yes,
say, not there's two tiers, right? There's reasonable aspirational and there's like reasonable reliable. And when you do water supply assessments, we're on the reasonable reliable track.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
so
just mean
yeah,
that this
yeah.
is based on the level of spending you were given. You were not said, you were not told like, you know, this is based on the level of spending that you were given, correct?
yeah, yeah. And so we were asked also to make sure that we were being conservative and that we could rely on this information. And so we were judging it from that lens. So I like to say it, we were asked to build the base of the pyramid, you know, like this is what we can rely on. This is, you know, what's going to help our reliability in the system. We were not asked to do the rest of the pyramid or the top of the pyramid, which would be going on and going beyond further, which could be done. The question, and that's why I started with what was the question we were asked for and what were we asked to do. And so this is that lens and perspective of building the base of the pyramid, building that reliability that we can count on moving forward. It doesn't mean that we couldn't go higher. It doesn't mean that that's not possible and we shouldn't do that. It just means we're answering the question that we were requested to do so from a supply perspective, which is very different than a water conservation master plan and more the you know, reach goals that you always want to seek to do in addition to this.
Michelle, before you move on, I think it's important to clarify though, when we had discussions about this, we didn't talk about spending at all, correct?
Yeah.
The analysis that you completed was not tied to an investment level. It was tied to levels of participation that were reasonable and that we had a level of confidence in that we were looking for some confirmation on. And then also the water savings that were being projected, that the cost was not included in the analysis.
That's right. We weren't setting budgets. We weren't asked to set budgets. We were just supposed to be looking at savings and estimates and, you know, could we achieve this amount of participation looking at where you're sitting at post drought and, you know, where we're actually sitting in 2022, you know, and looking forward. So.
But you were constrained by these assumptions, right? This is not, I mean, what I'm trying to get at for the board and the public is this is not some sort of ultimate determination about reasonableness. This is based on, I mean, this was okay, let me finish and then I'll just ask my question.
Yeah, I have 2 more slides. Yeah, so that might help a little bit. So good. So bringing it back, so we did, Marin staff reran their Alliance for Water Efficiency tool and the resulting cumulative savings. So we basically had a slight decrease for the adjusted measures. And so we went from about 4,009 to 4,000. Again, we took some things out, we increased things based on what we saw, but it was pretty much almost net neutral for the measure that we were suggesting moving forward. So, and we have a list of the revised annual participations that were run through the analysis so that we could bring it back and give context to you. But again, for Cynthia's comment, this is assumed to be the base of the pyramid, not, so that would be the minimum, right? Like you supply plan to the minimum and then you go up from there to do your additional planning. I would want to definitely exceed this. I wouldn't want my goals to be higher than this, but this would be, you know, what could be incorporated in some of the base assumptions for the supply planning purposes only, I would say. And so with that in mind, this is some additional suggestions that we recommend to ensure savings in the Marin area moving forward. So first of all, we do recommend to consider some regulations moving forward. The entire, I would say, conservation field is shifting locally, nationally, California-wise, and people are definitely shifting to water budgets as people are getting more sophisticated data, more landscape area measurements, more GIS, more AMI. We're looking out decades. Like that seems sophisticated now, but don't forget we're looking forward into the future. I do think this is going to become more commonplace. A lot of people in California already have them. So I do think with the Marin area, this is something to consider. Net zero development model and remodel, I would actually put this on the coming, not so much an if, a more when question. There are already areas in the Bay Area that are considering this like right now, like in this month. They're already hitting their water maximum allocations. And with, it came up earlier, Larry's question about RENA, the regional housing needs assessment, they're continuing to request more development. With that comes more water use. And a lot of people are saying with what water? So as we develop, a lot of people are saying, okay, well, we can add the more units, but we are going to do a net zero ordinance on top of that. Some agencies have already been there for multiple years, and we have some examples we can share of people that have been doing this up and down in the state, and also it's coming locally. Retrofit on resale is another one to consider. Marin had this kind of a while ago. It was somewhat tracked, sort of not, but I think as we move forward in the future, it's something that could be considered. Also non-functional turf, we brought that up a little bit. The ordinances have been, I would say, very interesting to follow. Southern Nevada Water Authority, everyone's talking about in the field. Should we do it? Should we not? People are considering doing that. I know Marin and Carrie Pollard did a study on that and has been sharing out information, and we have a program, but I do think that is in the near-term future. I know historically Marin hasn't been doing as many ordinances, but I'm here to say I do think you should consider that strongly. I know it's a policy shift. I know it's a mentality shift, and we haven't been there. I do think looking forward in the future that that is going to be more commonplace. We are heading to a more regulatory structure as a state for conservation, and I do think this is kind of going to be part of the new like vision and view moving forward. That's going to be more acceptable and or expected for regions to have this before they're looking for more water supply in the region. So that's the first one. The second one is, and I know the ask, I know that's a big ask and a big shift, but I do think it's going to be warranted in your future. And then I would say the second point is equally important, and that's installing advanced metering infrastructure, AMI, throughout the service area. I know you do have 5,000 meters, but I do think it's super important to install the rest of the system and also to use the AMI data to enhance all of the programs. Not just one particular element of conservation, but a lot of the utilities become, quote, smart utilities and use AMI throughout the entire organization from the ground up. It can help things like, you know, the water loss like I was talking about and pressure zones and things like that. It can help with communicating with your customers to share information. It can help with targeting. The benefits go on. I do think if Marin wants to stay a leader and stay at the forefront of being reliable in their system, AMI is here. It's here to stay. And I think the entire industry is picking it up. A lot of people are already done. And as we hit droughts, people moved forward even faster than I had assumed, and putting the system in and getting them up and running. So it's a matter of time, I would say, before the rest of the region and the Bay Area has really picked this up. So I do think as we're looking out decades that this would be something that's very important to the success of the overall program, to have that information. It's so incredibly powerful to have access to that real-time data for many, many reasons. So with that, now we can take any questions. Yeah, I know you have some. So
I do have some.
I know you have some.
So thanks, Michelle. I just want to start out by saying your work is always, you and Lisa, your work is always exemplary. So I'm feeling, very, very pleased that we were able to, it took a little longer than we were hoping, but I'm very pleased that you were able to do this and, very grateful for your making the time. It's interesting just to maybe start at the end, what you're saying about water budgets. I'm really glad to hear you mention this. We've been raising this at the board level for some time. So I'm glad to hear you confirm that this is indeed where the industry is going, and hopefully that will better galvanize a conversation than we've had to date. Same as well for larger scale, deployment of AMI as well as ordinances. But the broader question that I want to get to is, I think it would be useful maybe to recap the board's interest in bringing on Madaus. And that is that we were looking for an analysis of efficiency and on-site reuse as capital investments comparable to all of the other major capital investment projects that are being reviewed in the water supply assessment. I mean, I know you're doing just this piece, but I'm just, for purposes of the public and the rest of the board, that was where we were coming from. And there's a fair amount of correspondence documenting that. So to overly simplify, the nature of major water supply capital projects is that you finance and spend a large amount of money up front to secure additional water supply on a relatively fast track, and then you harvest that supply essentially over a long period of time. So, again, to overly simplify, you don't plan to spend 25 years building desal or pipelines, and then gain those water benefits incrementally. So you end up with high water supply levels over a long period, which lowers the per acre foot cost. What we'd seen from the water supply assessment was not a major investment plan for efficiency and on-site reuse, but essentially the plan that staff had had in place for a long time to spend relatively small amounts annual as a % of our overall budget over a long period of time, and only very gradually accrue reduced demand over 25 years. In light of the severity of the drought and the fast changing nature of climate impacts and the relatively long timeframe for some of the better, more promising water supply augmentation strategies, a number of us on the board expressed that this concern that this slow roll approach may not be in the district for the ratepayers' best interest. So what we were interested in learning was what it would mean for the district, and specifically for supply and cost, if we accelerated investment in efficiency and on-site reuse options, all the ones that you mentioned and even others, as a capital project, to basically make an apples to apples comparison with the other options being considered in the water supply assessment. So if we made larger upfront investments like we would for desal or the intertie, to accelerate deployment of those strategies and then harvest those reductions over time, what that would mean. So what we were looking for was a somewhat different set of questions than it appears you were asked to assess. So I have a couple of questions. First, do you have a sense of how much demand reduction is likely to occur within the service area over the next 25 years, just as a result of passive conservation alone?
Yes, we were asked to look at, so this is active savings from active programs that we were looking at, but part of the 4,000 acre feet does include water loss and that Lisa spoke of. It does include these measures. It does include passive savings. The 4,000 acre feet, the best we had was over 2,000 acre feet were related to passive savings. I calculated as a number, and it was about, I think, 61% was passive savings and about 39% or about 1,500. These are round numbers,
right?
For easy discussion purposes.
So about 50% of what we're going to see by 2045 is going to be passive savings anyway. We wouldn't have to spend anything. So, okay, so that's really helpful. So only 40%, we'd only really be getting 40% with these relatively modest investments. So that's helpful. So what we've heard so far from, from the team is that the best we can expect is under 1,000 acre feet of savings each year. Is that compatible with you've got? I mean, I think my number is right around 940 acre feet each year.
I think I'd more like 1,500. It depends. I think if you're adding water loss or not or whatever, but yeah. We're in the same ballpark, but yeah, at about 50.
So I think the question is, is it possible? I think what we were really looking for, and I appreciate that you weren't asked to do this, which is why it's unfair for me to ask you, but I'm just going to ask you anyway. Is it possible that that the program? I mean, I think what we were really looking for, speaking for the board, and I don't know if other board members want to chime in here, is this really the most that we could hope to expect over time on a reasonable, being reasonable, but still. Is this really the best we can do, and that we really, that there would be no benefits to investing at higher levels up front? So this was kind of the good dialogue we kept having, and it doesn't really seem like we've unpacked that question yet. So I guess maybe to put it at a more concrete level, let me put it to you positively. Is it likely that higher levels of investment in both incentives themselves and staff would increase consumer uptake of some of the more highly leveraged actions that you've identified here?
Yeah, I think Larry was getting to that earlier. You know, if you do increase the incentive amounts, and you had staff and you had funding. I have gotten this question before. City of Sacramento was asking about this when they didn't have meters and they were going to AMI. Well, what if we speed it up? You know, what if we put them in faster? You know, would that be possible? And they did end up speeding it up. And the long story short, and now they have AMI and the City of Sacramento. But we were looking at that question, like, well, what if, you know, we do it over 10 years? What if we do AM over 5 years? So yes, depending on your strategy and your funding levels and when you spend the money, it can impact obviously your savings. Of course, it's going to impact your staffing and your funding levels. It all ties together.
Right. I mean,
And
all of
yeah,
the other
yeah,
right? I mean, we're talking about spending hundreds of millions of dollars
yeah,
on these other projects. So I think this isn't about making decisions. This is about getting data so that we
right.
can have more of an apples to apples comparison, which it seems like we don't really have yet. So I think the other related question is, you know, we definitely heard, you know, a fairly strong, you know, sense from staff that that the level of uptake that we saw from on the, just to use one example, the turf reduction program, it was never going to be any higher than it was during the first year of the drought. You know, we put a lot of effort into outreach, and people were, you know, to be technical about it, freaking out. And that was as good as it was ever going to get. And, you know, some of us felt differently, that it was the first year of the program. We were still funding at relatively low levels compared to what's, you know, technically possible. And it also takes time for these programs to, you know, to catch on. So I'm just interested if you have a view on that either way. I don't mean to put you on the spot, but I realize I am, because now we're in the speculation. But you know, this is what you guys do all the time. Would you agree that the first year of a drought, a program launched during the first year of a severe drought, that's as good as it's ever going to get? Or would you think that there would be opportunity for the program to actually grow over time as it, you know, became normalized, as there was, you know, reliable funding and staffing, that it could actually exceed those numbers?
Well, I guess the answer is anything's possible. I do think it depends on thinking a little bit about the character of the people that did participate. So when you went out, they acted quickly. They acted, you know, in a short time frame. They would have been, you know, if you look at the bell curve of people, you know, overall, like you have the early adopters, and then you have the middle ones, and then you have the like late adopters. I do think that each group of people and participants have their own, I guess I would say, motivators. So I do think when the program was functioning in 2021, that would have been potentially working in that first group of customers that were eager to do it, willing to do it, and could mobilize that fast. I do think moving forward in the future, you could potentially get more of those earlier group that just couldn't move that fast. Or, you know, because I mean, you got to think that was a really short amount of time. As we move forward into the future, how do we reach that next group? You know, how do we reach that middle group? What would that look like? Would it have to be more incentives, like Larry was getting at, the $5? Like, where's the sweet spot? And is it working with those customers? Are they truly interested? Is it how it was marketed? I know that the team went and like literally almost did a direct install program. You know, that's really expensive too. But I do think as the programs change flavor, if I can say that, over time, it not only is a messaging and an urgency, but it's also the type of customers that are participating that change the maturity of the program and the approaches. With that being said, I think there's also a lot of lessons learned too. When you really do something quickly and fast, it's hard to launch a program during the drought. So I do commend Marin staff for doing a good job in such a short order. That is a lift, I'm just going to say. And I did see how stressed out staff was, and they really rose to the occasion and did a good job. With that being said, if you get out of drought mode, it does have pros and cons. You can do it a little bit a different style, also people aren't listening as much. So it's kind of a balance in those two worlds. You would become more mature, more efficient, and better, but they're also maybe not listening as much.
I
So
want
yeah.
to add three things if I could. One
ahead.
is you also have the pandemic. You had a lot of people home. You had a lot of uptake,
Sure.
I would say, and that was an anomaly. So I would treat that as unique. And we do see high uptake during droughts and then a latent, like, you know, passive that then people do increase incentives on. They come back with policies like the water budgets we're bringing up, like the AMI, the tools that Carrie and her team needs to target and find how much overage and over application there really is. You'll refine that with time. So
Exactly.
the answers are to come, you
Yeah.
know, and that's the evolution Michelle's alluding to. And the tools are going to get better. So the irrigation controllers we have are going to get better. You know, it's just, you're going to have better uptake. And the extent that you go in the track of water budget based rates, you're going to get at that over application of water. I mean, it's just those customers are going to be more incentivized. You're going to know how much it is by better quantification. And then you're going to be left with the tools that you have at the board level too, and policies to do that. You know, some are going after the retrofit or resale on even controllers outdoors. I mean, we're seeing really aggressive policies.
Very aggressive.
We're working in, you know, states and in communities that, you know, are saying we're out of water in 10 years. What can you give us? And, you know, the boards are passing, you know, policies that we would never expect to see pass in those communities. So, I mean, it's, there's a lot that's moving on the policy front too, I would say. So yeah, definitely to Michelle's point about the like to get at the tail savings that you're talking about, Cynthia, and like pushing more, you're going to have to be in the policy and regulatory space to get at more.
Fair enough.
And up those participation levels. I mean, yep, it's going to come into a lot more targeting.
Right. So to be clear, I'm second to none in my admiration for staff. We have extraordinary staff, as I said earlier. I'm concerned that we are, as a board and as the public, still lacking the data we need about what's feasible. Because this seems to be, again, I'm cognizant that you were asked a very different question than the board was interested in. So rather than belabor that and, you know, spend time in that space, I mean, I think it's fair to say that this is not an analysis of what's feasible. This is analysis of what's reasonable. I mean, I don't know, maybe I didn't completely understand what you were saying, Carrie, about cost, but I mean, there were assumptions that were made that those do not seem to have been questioned. My understanding really of what you were doing, Michelle, was really mostly checking math. It wasn't what's possible if we changed our assumptions, if we had these other tools, or if we had these ordinances, or if we had, you know, whatever. We really, the idea of looking at this in terms of what if we accelerated investment, that it's simply not the question that was asked, and it was not, therefore, obviously we can't expect that to be the question that was answered.
Yeah, and that's clear. But it seems to me that one thing that would be very helpful is if you guys could point us, we'd pay you to do this, but point us to where to spend more money, or more efficiently spend the money, or more effectively spend the money. You know, one thing I find interesting, Lisa, you commented about the controllers. Well, if you have turf removal, the controllers become kind of less critical. I mean, there's still other watering needs, but you know, the heavy duty lift is the turf. The turf's the one that burns the water. So you're getting, you know, you're getting more efficient on a decreasing situation potentially. The other question that hits me is you didn't mention flume at all, and maybe you lumped that into AMI. I have been promoting AMI since I've been on the board. I am a civil engineer, you know, like you guys, and work in this, and it's something that I think is just a no-brainer, and for one purpose, that it gives the consumer instantaneous data. I mean, I ask my wife, who's a technical person, all the time, you know, how are we doing on our water? You know, where are we? And that's something that for me to do it, of course, I could go out and read the meter. I used to read meters for LA Water and Power, but you know, it's a lot of trouble. So the flume, it seems to me, is kind of a hybrid part of this. And to that end, another thing that kind of got under my skin a little bit was you were talking about letters about leaks. It's my understanding that the Flume will ID you with email, and it seems to me we should be using even the AMI data to generate an automatic response rather than a letter in that form. So anyway, if you've got any thoughts about Flume, and like I say, where to spend and what it would take to figure out where to spend the extra money, I think it's a good investment. And where's the biggest bang for the bucks?
Mhm. So I do think Flume has been a newer element on the market. I do think it's a nice complement to meters because it does help, like you were saying, give people some data, because otherwise it's kind of like you're a little bit blind. It's hard to manage what you don't know. That's what I'm just going to say.
Exactly.
So it's really
Exactly.
hard, to work in the dark. So
If not impossible, Michelle.
it's not impossible. It's very hard, and most people aren't going to take the time to do it. So Flume does help bridge for those that the 5,000 that don't. It also gives the customer the power to have the data on their own side, but not everyone has it. We only have a couple hundred in the service area, but I do think that ultimately, if we go in the AMI direction, that is everybody, and that's getting all the groups, not the early adopters who are going to want the Flume, because Flume is voluntary, so you're probably going to get that first group, but you're not going to get everybody. I think AMI would be a great enhancement because you're going to get the entire service area, not just pieces in a couple data points for those that have volunteered for them, unless you made them mandatory, for example. And it also provides tools for the staff that go beyond the capability of Flume. But it is a good tool
Sure.
for now, being that you're not fully deployed. But moving
One
Well,
of
it's
the
more discreet,
what-
actually, the Flume to get at the end uses, so it's a little bit different.
it is.
Enhancing tool, but yeah, when we're talking long-term, big picture, we're talking AMI.
Yeah, of course. Let me ask a question. One of the hesitancies, and I've been, as I said, I've been promoting this within the district since I joined the district. One of the hesitancies that's been expressed to me is they don't want to make the wrong decision about the technology. I think that's kind of, frankly, kind of lame. If software producers never went with their beta model, they would never put any software out. If you always wanted to get the best and make it the longest and the absolute best technology, blah, 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 you never get anything done. And it seems to me, I'd like to hear your thoughts on what you think about the status of the AMI equipment. And, I realize you may not be, software experts or IT people on what's the best, but it just seems to me we're dragging our feet on this. We've been dragging our feet for 20 years.
Can we take
Yeah.
that, Michelle? I can talk to them.
Yeah, I was going to bring up Redwood City.
AMI propagation studies too.
Yeah.
Why
don't you start and I'll follow?
Yeah, so the AMI technology, there are different vendors. It is, 8, 9 figures. I mean, these are big investments over a long time. There is a lot of anxiety over, product selection. I'm working with one system right now. They have 3 vendors disaggregated. They actually are intending to keep 2 of them because they don't want to be completely reliant on one vendor and one system because they had one go down. And that's just the reality of investing early. I would say on Michelle's point, like we're in the early majority phase now of like more adopting and more experience. The different vendors, they'll say, oh, you don't have to marry me for 20, you just have to date me for 10. I mean, they really, and that's concerning. I will say the software has gotten a lot better with the portals, the tools. I get an alert on my phone. I had a drip on my hose outside that the kids had left on. I got an alert as soon as it was 24 hours. It was in the afternoon. I went out, I shut it off. I mean, that's, one of the systems with one software and one portal, but the access is so much better. I would say, we're getting into the higher reliability. We are seeing quite the uptake in both the investment level is accelerated in the last 3 to 4 years, I would say, and the enhancements of the software portals for the customers are getting invested in much heavier. For quite some time, it was third party, you know, it was the metering companies themselves have brought more software in-house. So, and actually Michelle's done a good job. We had an AWWA national study on the customer portals and enhancing conservation. It's a space that we've been working in quite a bit. Yeah, a lot of opinions about that too, but I would say there's you know, you can accelerate the AMI. I've seen a lot of actually an uptake and acceleration of the AMI. If you're going to accelerate something on this, I would pick AMI over main replacement for a few hundred acre feet
That's
or
interesting.
anything else.
I would too.
I would
Yeah.
pick
That's
AMI
interesting.
acceleration.
I mean, and again, we're not in decision mode here. I think part of the reason we're asking these questions is because what we're still lacking is data. So I appreciate things are expensive, but every single thing we're looking at is expensive. So
Expensive. Yeah. they're
we
all
just
expensive.
gotta, you know, we can't not be looking at things because they're expensive, because some of the things we're looking at are, you know, we're looking at things that are $4,000, $5,000, $6,000 an acre foot. So we just need the data. We need the information, whether it seems expensive or not, because it's all going to be relative. And Larry, I'm sorry, I just want to finish with a couple of my questions because I'm going to have to go.
Sure, of course,
But,
of course.
Michelle, you'd indicated that Marin Water was, you know, has been a leader in efficiency in the past, and I think that's fair. And I want to emphasize again and again how much respect I have for Carrie and her team. So to me, none of these questions have to do with our conservation staff. They're amazing. It's a matter of, can we give them more tools? Can we give them more resources to do more, better, quickly? And how, and if we did, how does that compare to our other options? I feel like we just keep saying this and somehow it doesn't ever register. That said, you've indicated that Marin was a leader in efficiency in the past, and certainly, you know, we've done some things, and I appreciate all of the kind words about, you know, what we're doing currently. Where would you say, given everything you're seeing in the community, where would you say that we are relative to our, you know, California and Western Water colleagues? My sense is that we are no longer in the lead, that we're more middle of the pack, maybe even falling behind on the pack. You know, what's your, given the level of investment that's being proposed here, which is fairly, as I said before, limited. It's, you know, several $100,000, you know, maybe 500,000 a year in rebates, you know, going forward, basically being held constant. That's what's being proposed. So, you know, where would you say, I guess I'm just trying to get at, with too many words because it's getting late. You know, would you say that we're still a leader, or would you say that we're more middle or falling back of the pack?
I would say you were a leader in the beginning. I remember, and many of three of you, I definitely remember this, when you originally adopted, we did a program A, B, C, D, and E, and you adopted program E. I will always remember that. And I remember Dan Carney turning around and saying, "Did that just happen? Did that really just happen?" I said, "That just happened."
I remember it too. It was very early in my tenure, and very
yes.
about that. Yes.
So that was a surprise. We were all surprised. There was options A through E, E being the highest, A being the lowest, and the board approved program E. And that was significant funding that definitely yielded more staff. That was definitely a direction and a voice. And at that point, that did put you to be in the leading area. If you looked at the Bay Area, that was definitely a strong movement in that direction, and you did hold that pace for a while. Moving ahead to today, I would definitely say over time, there are others that are doing more than Marin. Redwood City got AMI back in 2013. So we're turning the corner on 2023. So it was about a decade ago. So there are others who, Alameda County Water District, I worked on their conservation plan. They just adopted AMI. They have adopted it. They're funding it. They're moving forward with it. So there are others regionally right here in your neighborhood that are moving forward with AMI. So, and the example of the net zero development is across the bay from you. These aren't other areas, other regions. They're looking at it and looking at adopting it in December. So I would say
North Marin has AMI.
Yes, yes, exactly. And Santa Rosa does too. So, and we were working with them on their portal, and they've got data, and, you know, so there are movements in the area. If they continue to move forward in that direction, then you are correct. Would no longer be a leader. You'd be kind of middle and slowly, and that's what we're recommending. If you want to stay in this space, if you want to have conservation be a key element moving forward for your service area, then you're going to need to look at some of these things and actually not talk about them, but do them. Or you will definitely be falling behind where you have been in the past, and not necessarily leading. Yeah.
I appreciate
Yeah.
that. That perspective is really helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm less concerned about where we fit in the loop as opposed to doing what we need to do.
Yeah, I would
You
say
know.
I've seen the benefits of others, right? There's like, I used Redwood City's data, and I will call them out, and their data was so amazing. I had a pre-drought for them. I had 2013 data. So I had data before this last drought. And they were one of the few, San Francisco, Redwood City, there was a few of them that had data pre 2014, 15, and 16. And just having that information of pre, during, and post, so incredibly powerful for their entire system. It was so helpful, so insightful, and we just could make so many different observations, recommendations. Where are we going? How do we work with this? If we put an ordinance in place, is it working? You can watch the data. You can watch the people. Is it working? I can see it. I can prove it. I don't have to assume it.
Right. And Larry, I'm sorry, to interrupt, I just have to go soon. I really agree with you. The reason I'm raising it is because we keep being told in these meetings over and over and over again that there's nowhere else for us to go, that we're the leader, we're at the very top, we're at the apex. So I don't want to lose track that, there is a context here. And again, it's not a basis for decision making. It is a basis for understanding where we're at, what's feasible, and whether it is really true, whether it really makes sense for these ratepayers, for this district, to simply be told, this is it. Just holding these costs constant for 25 years, that's it. That's what we're going to be doing. And this is the best that we can do. And I'm not hearing that that's the case.
Yeah, that's a good point. Let's.
There's a couple of smart ways to go about it. We can talk to you more about,
Okay, that's cool.
There's reliability or uncertainty or insurance, third party, AMI. I mean, whatever the sticking point is, there's a lot of solutions, smart solutions that people have worked out, and that
Cynthia and I have kind of dominated these questions. How about Monty? How about Larry? Or how about Jack? Anything you want to say?
Yeah, I mean, I'll jump in really quickly just because I know it is getting late, and this has been fantastic. Thank you, folks, so much. We really, I think, wanted to peel back the layers of work that we have done today and peer into some deeper questions here. And our looking at what our neighbors around us are doing is really helpful, because we are trying to. We don't want to, it's not a competition. I think when we look around and see our neighbors around us making moves in this direction, they're not wasting money. They're making smart moves. We assume that, and I think for good reason. And it gives us a sense of, how are we doing keeping pace? And, I think that at the same time too, we want to really have a good understanding of what the yield of these different actions can be and the cost per acre foot. I mean, we very much are cost conscious here. And so I think that to the extent that we can have that this discussion has helped us, I think, to understand the numbers a little bit better. I think if there's room for further sharpening of our estimates based on this conversation, I think that would be time well spent. We really want to be cost effective here. That's going to be a key driver, among other things. And so this has been really helpful, and I hope we actually continue to identify maybe where you could help us sharpen things up just a little bit more.
No problem. And there is a lot of AMI data. The Bay Area Water Supply and Conservation Agency and Valley Water have a symposium of AMI every year. I've been the last 2-3 years in a row, and they share how's it going, what's working, where you at, what's the cost, what vendor you're using, and it's like kind of utilities only. I'm like the only consultant there, but anyways, but I get the good, the bad, the ugly of how is it really going, and I'm happy to share the insights that I've been learning over the last 4 years of where they are, how they're navigating through this. So that might be helpful and insightful.
Cool. Larry?
that. Yeah, I have never assumed that our conservation budget was set in stone. I mean, right now, our district is facing severe financial challenges because of the drought. So, you know, that's why we've capped conservation. But moving forward, you know, I have not assumed that as a policy of this board. So I really disagree with that statement about, you know, our philosophy and what staff is directing. I'm more skeptical about AMI, but, you know, having heard your experience with it, you know, it definitely is kind of opening my brain a little bit to the AMI approach. But is there data indicating that installation of AMI actually decreases water use?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
SFPUC has studied it like you wouldn't believe
Okay.
and publishes it all the time.
Okay.
Others
and-
do as well.
Okay, and
We
you know,
see anywhere from 10 to 20% of accounts continuously leaking. You find those accounts as a result. That
Yep.
lets you focus your program right there.
Yep.
So, I mean, that's just, when we talk letters and we talk communications and the tools for Carrie staff, you can talk to customers and help them, like, get to the bottom of it. I mean, that's, we see double-digit number of accounts leaking continuously.
and will it help the district track its own internal transmission leaks?
Yes. AMI is
It
very
helps.
powerful.
That is so you're getting into the apparent loss side of things, which I didn't talk, or you didn't ask me to review, but I have more discussion, more talk, if you want more on that side of things, but that's more the accuracy, meter inventory, age, revenue. I mean, there's a whole nother discussion on the parent loss side. We were talking and you were asking, and this analysis was on the reliability of recovering real losses. So, but yes, there is a discussion on apparent losses, which is also, you know, paying for what you use, right? So.
Sure,
Yeah.
absolutely. Okay, I think anything, Jack, on your end, because I'm ready to go to the public here and try to get this thing closed up.
Yep, no, I'm good.
Okay, cool. Terry, any public comment?
Yes, we have 5. Let me, if I can have the screen removed, please. The sharing screen. The first 3 speakers we have is Mr.
Michelle.
Yep. Hold on.
Yeah.
Sorry. Just trying
Is
to.
Mr. Phil Sauter, and then Jenna Payne and Larry Minikes. Go ahead, Mr. Sauter.
Thank you very much. This was very helpful. And I don't think we're waving goodbye to Madaus tonight, but
we're not.
Good. Before we do, one thing I would really like to see is the top of the pyramid analysis, as you refer to it. And I can provide one data point, which is that we use 40% of our residential water outdoors. And I think that translates to about 8 million gallons a day. So that's kind of one data point if you're talking about an aspirational program. However, we only reach that data point when our reservoirs get down to about 30%. I think it's really smart to help our users approach that data point without being in a drought, without saying all of a sudden your water's shut off. And for me, a goal has always been, let's get that 4 million gallons of daily reduction achieved by 2025 rather than by 2045. And I'd like to see an analysis by Madaus, what it would take, what kind of budget it would take, what kind of program it would take to get to that 4 million gallons by 2025, maybe 2026. It's much better for us to get prepared, or to prepare our users to get rid of that turf before they absolutely have to overnight. Second is the idea of 125 sites being converted to AMI or Flume a year, I think is really kind of silly. I think that we should be looking at 1,000. I think we should be looking at all Tier 4 water users within a year. I would like to see, I'd like to see us turn our back on low yield programs, just like Carrie and her group concentrate on the high yield stuff. I like the idea of the impactful engagement. I'm not that big on ordinances and enforcements, but I'd like to see what kind of a budget could enable us to prevent ordinance and enforcements. And if it's $10 million a year, for the first year, it certainly wouldn't be that much the second year, but it's in line with some of our other water supply programs. So I'd like to see a goal. I'd like to see Medal's asked to put together a program that would save us 4 million gallons a day by 2025. Let's see if there's anything else here. I think Director Kohler really asked a lot of the questions I would have asked. Leaks, I think, should get a phone call and not a letter and not an email. They should get a phone call. And I think our incentives should be to make it really worthwhile for people to replace their lawns. Thanks.
Thank you. Ms. Jenna Payne, please.
Oh, hey there. This is actually Paul Mann from Water Champions. I'm sorry, I came late to this, but Jenna was on the call the whole time, so I'm hijacking her phone. Anyhow, first of all, I want to just say I really appreciate the effort to have this discussion on conservation to reduce demand. I think it's a very important conversation. I'm a little concerned the recommendations seem to move towards efficiency solutions that are out there and away from reuse. And I think that Cynthia Kohler's point about investment in reuse and efficiency infrastructures very, very important, and one we should really think about. Let me try to move the discussion from maybe hypothetical to hard data, because I think there's been some good conversation. But as someone who's been doing this in the field, let me try to give some data. So first of all, I think we need to update the solutions that are being rebated. Laundry to landscape is a very old school solution. It was great, but washing machines are getting more efficient, and most people have irrigation already, and they don't really want to do a second line. So it's not surprising that's not an uptake. But let me talk about a family of 4. They generate about 1,000 gallons per week of gray water. That's real, maybe more in some cases. That's a lot of water. And rainwater harvesting generates 600 gallons per inch of rain per 1,000 square feet. So, we really don't want to talk about tanks that are 1,500 gallons. I rarely ever install those. We're installing upwards of 5,000 gallons. And those refill multiple times. And with climate whiplash, we're seeing people are irrigating sooner, started in February this year, and did it multiple times throughout the year. And now there's solutions that recycle that gray water, and that can be stored in those tanks to recharge them daily. So there's a real need to think about how these solutions work together. And we also need to talk about permaculture methods of slowing, sinking, spreading stormwater, because it is coming quickly, faster than ever. It runs off, and we need to have these homes grabbing that and storing it so that we can be more fire resilient and regreen the landscape. So that's it. But the last thing I want to say is the reason that the rainwater and the gray water solutions aren't working, you need bigger incentives and you need installers. No one can install a solar system, and it's very hard to do this with these systems as well. So let's get some bigger rebates. Look at Sonoma's $5,000 tank rebate. Look at the city of Santa Rosa's $100 per gray water fixture rebate. And then look at the studies I sent you for Australia and my case studies. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Good evening. It's late. I'll try to be succinct, or I will be succinct. And Michelle and Lisa, I want to thank you very much for a very informative presentation. There's a tremendous amount to unpack. One thing I want to mention is May 20th presentation on AMI, and the AWWA quoted 6 to 12% reduction in water use with AMI. At least that's from the slide that you provided. Looking at the big picture here, we're trying to find ways to reduce water use. And there's one variable that has to be included in this, and that's that there's an assumption here that our relationship with water will remain the same through 2045. And we don't know that to be true, because we can look at so many commodities today and see how radically our relationship is changing with some of these commodities. And I think we can expect something very similar to happen with water. I'm not a predictor, but you can look at trends, and you can assume that the proportion of funds we spend on water today is going to change. And how will that affect pool covers, for example? Well, people say, hey, let's put it on. This thing is just costing us too much. And I think that's your greatest incentive, is going to be looking at our water rates, getting our infrastructure in place, looking at our supply options. It's going to be expensive. And I think that variable has to be brought in, those what ifs. And with that, thank you so much again for this presentation.
Thank you, sir. The next three speakers, Clayton Smith, Marilyn Price, and Roger Roberts. Go ahead, Mr. Smith.
Yeah, it was a very interesting presentation, although very long. I am really baffled by this term net zero development or remodel. And immediately I wrote down next to it, is that even possible? And what are you actually talking about? Net zero development. That seems out of the league of my understanding. And also retrofit on resale, how this is going to affect the turnover value of property. Particularly, I think, given the fact that we're likely to be heading into a higher real rate of interest on the mortgages going forward, particularly with the shift in economic policy, which I think is actually more permanent than people might think. And that, of course, feeds back on the overall tax base for the county and all the government programs that feed off of it. The AMI, I have to say that a big question now going on politically is the idea of the adoption of social credit scores, like they're doing in China, and the imposition on privacy that this implies. And so I found that your description of flumes, I had never heard of that before. I think that some people would be happy to have information on a real-time basis, only though if it was only available to them. And I think bringing that to light would be very helpful. As for being leadership, I think in the adoption of novel technologies, there's a virtue, I think, in letting others make the big mistakes, particularly that's just the pragmatic side of me. As far as the turf replacement, I'm not sure if you're talking about AstroTurf, but or major changes in landscaping. But I don't know. It would be very interesting if you could actually come up with a reference list of vetted, knowledgeable landscapers. I mean, trusting labor in this county, finding trustworthy labor to do these kind of any project now in this county is very difficult. I've been burnt by so many of these people, and I think a lot of others have too. So that would be helpful. Thanks.
Thank you. Miss Marilyn Price and then Mr. Roger Roberts.
Yes, and I will be very brief, and I am so glad you all are discussing conservation, and thank you all for looking into it too, and Cynthia for bringing up her points. And I am just an ardent conservationist, and I really hope that our board, I would like to see Marin be a leader in California. in using reuse and efficiency and regulation. We are in a different time now, and it's, from all that I read, it's not going to get better. It's going to get worse, and we all need to be prepared. So I just hope as I watch this along that you all are considering the future of grandchildren that you have and those that are to come, because we need to do a lot. Thank you.
Thank you.
Marilyn, just a point of reference. I believe the statistic is still correct, that there are more toilets flushed in Marin County with reclaimed water than any other water district, number-wise. So, you know, the district has led in the reclamation of water and applying it to direct uses like flushing toilets, the Hilton by the Civic Center. The toilets in that entire hotel are flushed with reclaimed water. So we're trying. Always can do more. Okay, Terry.
Mr. Roger Roberts and then Councilmember Cutrano. Go ahead, Mr. Roberts.
Yes, I seem to recall an AMI investment that's being mooted at the district of $25 million.
Yeah, it's something like that, Roger. Yep.
Is that sufficient to have all 61,000 customers be on AMI?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I would be interested in understanding, if I've heard correctly, that the return on investment on 25 million would be 20% reduction in water supply. And if we did a rate calculation, what that return on investment actually turns out to be, does that mean that you've recovered the cost of doing that in 4 years or 5 years, or is it 15 years? Is that something that Madeus can opine on or answer at some point? Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Chance Cutrano.
Yes, thank you very much. And I know it's getting late, so I'll try to be brief. I just want to plus one some of those sentiments from Paul Mann. I thought those were quite eloquent, and he's definitely on the ground in our community doing work with residents. So I really appreciate his insights, and I think that they're really helpful as we move forward in this process. I also wanted to, commend the additional recommendations, specifically the BBR recommendations or the water budget recommendations. And for some of those other items there with regard to net zero development and other items like that, just another invitation for Marin Water as you move forward with this to please do reach out to us in the local jurisdictions to help us figure out how we might best work some of these things into our housing elements, work some of these things into ordinances as we're doing, green building ordinances and all these other things, trying to make sure that we're doing the most to protect our precious water resources as well. The other thing I wanted to add, which I might speak to turf replacement programs and maybe to some of the comments that were brought up by various directors. And I believe the first speaker referring to, okay, we have a bottom of the pyramid. How do we get to some top of the pyramid discussions so we can have good apples to apples comparisons? Alongside, regulatory approaches to things, I think there's definitely a desire to see, stronger incentives to match up with that. Especially to make, not from an equity perspective, to make sure everybody participates in, water efficient, water resilient future. And we're not penalizing folks, but I think it was even in the last couple of weeks that Mayor Garcetti in LA announced that they're upping the ante for turf replacement down in LA and doing it at $5 per square foot. Instead of $3, which I think is what Marin Water has been doing in the past. So definitely want to have a better understanding of how some of these incentives can move us further, faster. And I think the public would greatly appreciate that as we're grappling with some of those really capital intensive projects that we're comparing these things up against. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Just keep in mind that the capital gets even more intensive when you do it by house. It's, you know, when you lose the collective advantage of having it centralized and you start doing it per house, like installing gray water systems, the cost goes up really quickly. It's quite easy to spend $1 billion installing these units. So I'm not arguing against installing them. I'm just, you know, laying out the facts that when you do it 60,000 times, it gets pretty pricey.
We have one more, former
Okay.
Mayor Frank Egger. Go ahead, Mr. Egger.
Thank you very much. Frank Egger from Fairfax. On the issue of AMI, I find it quite interesting. $25 million to convert the whole district to smart meters. So I guess the question is, what will $25 million buy Marin Water? Probably 3 sets of spillway gates on 3 of your reservoirs, which could collect a lot more water than you're going to save with AMI. And we keep hearing about the water districts that have 4-year supply on hand. There's 1,200 water districts in the state of California. And I've been trying to get a list of those that have a 4-year supply, and I don't know of any with a 4-year supply on hand. But hopefully, you know, the Marin Water can get a list of those districts. We can find out where they are and how they're doing it. We took our lawns out in 1984 here in Fairfax. During the summer, we used maximum 36 gallons per day. That's for our household of 2. We have a lot of green around our home, a lot of hedges and a lot of growth. We collect rainwater. This year, we only collect 480 gallons per storm, but we've done it twice already this year. We collected it once. I emptied the water barrels, watered the yard up good, and we collected the second storm was another 480 gallons. So rainwater catchment really works. Conservation works. Conservation works for water, works for electrical use. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks, Frank. Keep in mind, there's about 2,200 water districts in California, is the number I've always used. So there's a lot of them. And I'm not aware of any with a 4-year water supply, just FYI.
There are no further speakers.
Okay, I'd like to thank the public for hanging in there with us. I know it's been a long trek here to get through this. We got a little more to do, so feel free to hang in. And let's thank Madaus. You did a great job. We look forward to speaking to you more about this. And let's go on to number 10.
Okay, thank you, President Russell, directors. I'll try to be brief. It's late. This is about our continuing resolutions that the board's been adopting under AB 361 for virtual meetings. The last board action on this was October 18th, which means that the resolution will expire Thursday, the 17th of November. The governor has indicated that he will likely terminate the emergency proclamation February 28th, which means that the district or all public agencies actually would no longer be able to hold meetings virtually under those rules, going back to new rules adopted effective January 1st for some teleconferencing, and also the pre-existing Brown Act rules for teleconferencing. So essentially in-person meetings with very few exceptions. I wanted to remind the board that adopting the resolution that we have in the package doesn't preclude in-person meetings. We have an allowance for virtual meetings, but that doesn't mean that the board cannot opt to have in-person meetings where appropriate. And it does maintain that flexibility. Staff does have a plan to return in-person meetings when the board is ready, which does include possibly limited access to our boardroom because it is small, but also for public participants, but also to have virtual participation for members of the public. And with that, I'll open it to the board's discussion on this item.
Thank you, Molly. Yeah, what I'm looking for is a return now to in-person meetings. I appreciate the fact that we can pass the ordinance and do both, but I'm really looking to do it now. I don't see any reason to wait until February. I presume we're able to move forward with or without the governor's approval.
It's
I
within the board's
see,
discretion, yes.
and I see strict adherence to the Brown Act on this. You know, you've got to post, you've got to have the 3 members in the district and all that kind of stuff. I'm not talking about any advantage to, you know, being gained by the not being in person. I think that the situation we are in, it is critical with 3 new board members that we have them where we can see them and we can talk and the public can achieve that same goal. So I think it is time. Like I said earlier, our first shot at this is going to be Friday, and we'll go ahead with a doc in person. And I would like us to just pick this up and go forward right now, starting on December 1. All the meetings will be in person.
So, President Russell, just if I could, to be able to do Friday in person that staff would like, you know, we're getting some stuff together. If it works for the board, we may want to think about that would be the effective date for being back in person. So we aren't going back and forth. So I've just asked the board to think about your suggestion, December 1st, or is it this coming Friday would be the start date? And I believe between this Friday and do we have any other meetings? That may be it, right? So we're really just talking about the differences of one meeting on Friday.
Yes. But it's a special meeting. So, you know, we have a special problem or special advantage of, you know, having some kind of event for the board members who are no longer with us.
Right.
So I'm cool. You know, I don't want to rush things, but it seems to me that we can do this. Your thoughts, Jack?
I've been the North Bay Watershed has been meeting in person for a couple of months now. I'm all for in-person meetings. I think they're much better.
Larry?
Sure. I mean, I think as long as we keep access by Zoom for the public.
Absolutely. Yes.
You know?
The meetings will be hybrid going forward.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And they'll be live streamed too, hopefully. So
yes, sir. Yes, sir. Okay, Molly, what do we need to do here? Should we just pass the resolution and deal with this?
It's up to the
later?
board. The board could decide to pass the resolution if there's an interest in preserving any flexibility, but if the board's interest is to not preserve any flexibility, to go fully back to in-person meetings as of Friday, there's not a need to pass the resolution at this time. So the board could just direct the staff and call it a night.
I just want to check with Ben. I mean, I agree. We got to get back together, and so let's make that happen. But Ben, are we ready to get back in the meeting room? I just want to, if we're going to do it, I would, if it's a difference of this week or in a week or two through the holidays, I just want it to be done right so that people who don't show up, who are joining virtually, that they continue to have an accessible experience that allows them to participate. So are we ready to do that?
Are you talking about board members or public?
I mean, well, I'm talking about the public, but anybody, like my memory is when we tried to do this hybrid virtual thing, I think once or something like that, it was a little rough. But it's been rough for everybody who's been trying to figure this stuff out. I just wanted to, if we're going to do it, let's make sure that it's working so that it's not an experience for people who are used to being able to join like this. This is a very functional format, that doesn't have many hiccups. The board, the back and forth in the boardroom was a little rough, I think, the last time we did it. just want to make sure that we're ready to do it. And if it takes a little bit more time, I'd rather do it right.
I can't guarantee there won't be hiccups, but what we today would have been a stretch, but I think by Friday, we're going to be ready to give it a go. I think we'll be able to conduct it. More times, yeah, I mean, always better. I mean, but I would just leave it. I think we'll be ready to do it Friday, if that's what the board wants. If not, if Friday's not significant, then, you know, the December date. But you know, I just, from a staff standpoint, we were looking forward to, ideally, if it would work out, to have the board present, to thank the board members that are transitioning and that kind of thing. Doing it in person felt nice for the staff. I'll just leave it at that.
My thinking is, let's give it a shot. And, you know, if we drop the ball, we drop the ball.
So,
You know,
if we're going to do that for Friday, we may want to take Molly's advice and pass it anyway, where we just have belts and suspenders if something were to go awry, even though I'm telling Director Schmidt we have it covered. We'd have all our bases covered. If we adopt it and we have the flexibility, we would plan Friday to be in person, and we would renotice the meeting so the public would see that, right, Molly?
Yes,
And
that's
yeah, we'd be ready to go.
Could I just say something? You know, the courts have been doing hybrid appearances for months.
Yeah.
And even after months, there's still hiccups. So, you know, I was just in court, I think it was yesterday, and, you know, sitting in court, and you've got a lot of the defendants are popping up on the screen, and it's not that seamless. I mean, it works pretty well. And it's a great thing for the efficiency of the court to have both. So, you know, I think passing the resolution, proposed resolution, giving you guys a little flexibility with the direction of the president that, you know, he wants to move forward with in-person meetings. We can have it both ways. You know, we have the best of both worlds. So that's the way I see it procedurally.
Sounds good to me.
okay, how about public comment?
There are two, either Jenna Payne or Paul Mann, and then the next one is David Bihar. Jenna Mann or Jenna Payne or Mr. Mann, please.
Thank you so much. This is related, President Russell, sorry, to your comment about gray water and that it's cheaper to do.
Oops, I apologize. I was trying to lower his hand. Let me start that again. I apologize. Go ahead, sir. I apologize on that one.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
We can.
Okay. President Russell, I just want to address the comment that you made that a centralized system is cheaper than individual gray water systems. And I think I'd love to see some data on that, and also just sort of think about, it may be cheaper for marine water to do that, but the implication is that the cost of infrastructure, pumping, electricity, all falls to the customer, or a large part of it. Those are the surcharges. And then the issue of climate comes into play. So I really would like us to have a bigger, newer discussion about how decentralized water reuse is actually going to save water. It's going to reduce consumption. It's going to reduce demand. That means you'll get ease on supply, and it will help our climate. So please, let's have a newer discussion. And if we want to have this discussion, let's get some more data and let's compare these things so that we actually have rationale in these statements. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Bihar, please.
Hi, this is not a water comment. This is just a tech comment. I've seen
hybrid go south so many times. I was at a workshop that was run by NASA and they couldn't quite pull it off. I've been at workshops run by the National Center for Atmospheric Research and they couldn't quite pull it off. It's if you've got speaking on the, in person and distant, it's just really difficult. I would urge you to, if you can, go all out back in public. I completely agree with that sentiment that Larry expressed. I agree with Larry Bragman that there are difficulties that you see. But think about poor Monty. He's been on the board for 2 years and hasn't had an in-person meeting yet. We need to get him one of those. So I would just then put a lot of time into the tech if you're going to do hybrid, because it's tough. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, David.
And 1402, please.
Yes, James Holmes. I'd just like to say that the city of Larkspur and the Larkspur City Council and the Marin Board of Supervisors are both doing hybrid meetings, and they go very smoothly, and there's no difficulty whatsoever. I do think it requires a little bit of heightened ringmaster expertise on the part of the board clerk, which undoubtedly you have here. But as I say, those two agencies, and certainly Larkspur is not a major operator, but there's no doubt it can be done, and it can be done seamlessly and smoothly, and it is being done by those two agencies.
Thanks.
Thank you. There are no further speakers.
Okay, so I think we should go with Larry Bragman's suggestion. So we need a motion.
I'll move it.
Second.
Roll call.
Vice President Schmidt,
Aye.
Director Bragman,
Aye.
Director Gibson,
Aye.
Director Kohler, and President Russell.
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay, Terry, you're up.
Okay, I'll make this really quick. There are two meetings.
Wait, Cynthia's here.
I'm just saying I have to go. I have a call on a medical issue, so my siblings are waiting for me. So I've got to go. Great to see all of you. And
You want to vote?
on what? Didn't we just vote?
Yeah, we didn't hear you though.
Terry,
Did you
didn't
vote
hear
aye?
me?
I saw her mouth move saying yes.
Oh, okay. Okay, I think you're muted, Cynthia.
I don't think I'm muted. I
I
really
can read her lips.
I'm just so sorry. I just have to go. So
Sorry. Well,
first,
we understand.
thanks, everybody,
We
and have a
understand.
good night. Bye.
Thank you.
Yeah, so there are two meetings this week. Tomorrow morning is the Communications and Water Efficiency Committee at 9:30. Friday is the Operations Committee meeting that will be in person. And then the next Board of Directors meeting is a special meeting, which will be Tuesday, December 6th at 5 p.m. There are two external meetings coming up. The first one is the ACWA Fall Conference, November 29th through December 2nd. And then the North Bay Watershed Association meeting is December 2nd. And then I want to wish everyone a happy Thanksgiving next week.
Thank you, and you too. Okay, we need to adjourn into closed session for a few minutes.
Yes, we
So-
do.
Okay. Bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Everybody gets to leave. Terry, am I the host?
Yeah, I'm going to make you the host. I just want to remind the public to please leave and so we can start the closed session and then they can rejoin later on. Let me make you the host, Molly. Let me stop the recording. Oh, wait, no, I just made you host. You would have to stop or pause the recording. I apologize. Were you able to
Okay.
pause it?
Okay, well, this time I'm in the same time zone, so it's easier. The meeting, the closed session adjourned at 10:50 with no reportable action, direction to staff.
Okay.
Thank you. I think that concludes our items on the agenda.
Okay, cool.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Good night,
Have a
everybody.
good night, folks.
Good night,
Well,
everybody.
guys, you're going to be missed. So.